Alright, it's been a while since I've made one of these videos, but since it is St. Patrick's Day, it seems only fitting that I should do another review of the next Soulfinder book, which I seem to just be doing on St. Patrick's Day. We have our main character, Patrick Fretter, back again for a new series of adventure/misadventure. The first book, the first Soulfinder book by Doug Ernst, I really liked it, and I actually really like this one too. However, I will say that there are some things that I would say could be improved upon for the third one, and I certainly am looking forward to any new installments. But after reading this or looking through it, basically 2.5 times, I just read it for the first time this morning. It's just about St. Patrick's Day and almost over on the East Coast. I liken it to trying to make a cake with the best ingredients possible. And if you were to eat some of the ingredients on their own, some are more enjoyable than others. Even in some combinations, if you don't do everything in the right steps, in the right order, with the right timing, temperature, or whatever, you're not going to have the same delicious cake. And this is really a thing where I haven't read the first book probably in over since I did the last review, which is just about 2 years ago, and I remember it quite fondly, quite well. And I think what's suffering here is a situation where the storytellers know so much about the story that they don't necessarily think about things from the perspective of an audience coming in with fresh eyes. So let's talk about by looking through the book. By the way, the book is really nicely done. It's got the gold on the outside of the pages. The artwork is really nicely done. You have this awesome bookmark. It comes built into it. Quality of the book, the printing, everything is very high. I would say in general, one thing that I did like in the first book gave a broad outline, as I remember, of the different means of demonic activity culminating in possession. And since our book is about an order of ex-military or veterans who went in the clergy, who are exorcists, and their main thing is fighting this demon, well, a series of demons, but I forgot the name of the character. They do mention him a few times. But essentially, most of my problems are with storytelling, and the bigger problem is that we don't linger long enough, that the story moves maybe, I would say, too fast, and let's just get into it. In fact, I'll show a little bit of, here's the other thing. The quality of the paper is very nice, but it's so shined, it's very difficult to photograph. It's a very dark comic, although I wouldn't say impenetrably so. A lot of it happens at night and underwater. But what's really nice about this book in particular is once you go through the story, and you can see that there's some of the coloring in here when we get to the underwater is really nicely done. It's very rich, but as I say, it's also very dark. and the pops of light. Now the reproduction in the video is not going to be nearly as good. There's a little bit more greens and things present that aren't really showing through. There's some really nice contrast and things like that. But what's cool is in this edition that the new artist from the series, Timothy Lim, did the first one. We have a whole new style, although there's some homage paid to what Tim Lim had done. But they reprint the entire story as just maybe it was part of the deluxe package. It's been a while since I did it. I don't know that this was offered in every version of the book, but I definitely got the one that had the black and white art. And there's some really great shading going on. It's a little hard to see, but even some elements and it really doesn't really come up in this camera very well. But cross-hatching and some other inking tricks and things, it really has a great presentation and really is quite nice to experience this book in two different ways. And really you do get to see a lot more in the black and white. And then in some cases the color really does enhance. It's fascinating actually to kind of be able in the same book to go back and forth and to get a sense of the differences. Now the story starts off in midnight, and but there really is so much more clarity. And I know it's because we're trying to highlight action at the bottom of the page. Well, let's just get to it a little bit. Now, apparently everything is happening in Steepleton, Maryland, which is supposed to be a sleepy 10,000 person residence in Maryland. And I get a kick out of stuff like that. I often think of Murder, She Wrote, where Angela Lansbury's character, Jessica, I forget what her last name is. My mom watched and loved the show quite a lot. But after 13 seasons or so, this woman who's an author in this sleepy little town, how many murders have transpired in this dinky little town? In the same way, now with 10,000 people, it's a little hard to see, but we have a whole bunch of these multi-story buildings. So I guess maybe people come here to work and run businesses, but don't necessarily stay here. Yeah, that's what it is. But anyway, I get a hoot out of things like that. How metropolitan all of a sudden this place has become in the span of 1 year. But anyway, so we have three main characters that are outlined here. Our team, which is Father Patrick Redder, who is the newest member of the Soulfinders, Father Reginald Crane, who is his mentor, an older guy, Vietnam vet, and Gregory Chua, who is basically the sleepy Steepleton's, I won't say he's the lone detective, but he's the cop that's assigned with the Soulfinders, again, who are in this tiny little town, but it's enough to have this duo of exorcists that are, I guess, have enough work here that they are stationed. And I guess it's a good thing that they are, because all sorts of shenanigans seem to be happening in this town. Now, that being all said, and something else that I'm still not quite clear on, the order has been around. In the top, it says the Order of the Soulfinders was founded in 531 AD, which is awesome background that this has been going on. I guess maybe it's not been in a continuum, but since 531 AD, I don't know if Father Patrick Breder is only the 79th since 531 AD, or if there are currently 79 or 80 currently doing their work. It's not clear to me. The way they make it sound is like there's only one that gets brought on per generation or something like that. So I'm just not sure about that. Maybe that's something that'll get explored later on. We'll get some clarity. Now, I will say that, so getting back to the very poor cake analogy, is all the ingredients that are fantastic. So we start off here at this sleek little town with Detective Chua, who I thought at first was made, well, he's a good guy, I assume a good Catholic boy that grew up to become a police detective, dealing with a homeless man. It turns out that he's meeting with an informant. I guess it's not necessary to the story, but this is strange. It kind of looks like he's giving him some information on where to find the shelter. Not necessarily looking, I guess he's supposed to be identifying someone in a photograph. Again, it's not necessary, but if it's not necessary and you're trying to show Chua doing something, I wish it were more clear. And I know it's not, we're just trying to pick up in the middle of action. And of course, within one thing where we get, again, it's the pacing thing. The artwork is wonderfully done, but sometimes there's choices which it's a little bit of a head scratcher for me. And all right, so to go through it, I'm doing this on the fly. There are no notes. This is pretty raw. So here we have a guy who I first assume is some homeless guy who Chua is trying to send off to the shelter or something along those lines, which is not the case. But off in the background, we see an explosion. All right, so that's exciting, except we're in this very small area where this is happening. Now, it is nice because we get a sense that, I guess this is Chua. We're doing a 180. I know it's over the shoulder, and I guess we have the clue of the hat and stuff like that. But part of me wishes that Chua is the face that we see turning to whatever this distraction is. I know it makes, to a degree, more sense that we're seeing over his shoulder, so he's witnessing something directly. But it takes me a little bit to get to the point where I'm 180 degrees and I know that this is Chua. I can see that the design of this, I guess, is here, and we're talking about Goodman. But it's not explained. I come back to Jim Shooter and his idea that this is the first time that someone is reading this book. And I don't think it hurts to remind people that, hey, this is Detective Chua, one of the good guys. And as we all know, good men with guns remain eternally vigilant. Must remain eternally vigilant. They seldom sleep. Maybe there's a better way to get this across, but let's know that this is Chua. I mean, most people who read this book are going to have read the one before it, but it's new artists, new art. Help us out, because at first, there's no indication that this is a cop. There's no badge on his belt or whatever. I'm extrapolating from what I already know, and yes, I know that we're right here. But this isn't necessarily an automatic leap. And I wish that we knew, because again, I don't know who this guy is. I really don't know who either of them. I'm making the leap that this is Chua. But this guy is doing a pose that shows immediate action. Now, granted, this guy is the one running, but turning to the danger rather than seeing it is more active than passive. And so, to a degree, I'd almost expect this guy to be the one bolting. It's a visual language thing, and maybe it's the hang-up is on me. But, yeah, I wish that this explosion, maybe a little less of this, a little more of that. But regardless, we have this man running off, charging toward suspects with superior firepower. I get what you're trying to do here. I just wish it were a little better. And to that point, so the thing that we're going to learn, might be a little hard to see here, but this looks like Black Hawk helicopter, definitely military, and we have an explosion. Again, look at all the buildings and 10,000 people. Granted, maybe the populace really is dramatically. Maybe Maryland has filled up with so many new people coming to it that they had a massive building boom. But these buildings are drawn like there's a skyscraper. That's the size of a car. Whenever you can't see windows, that means it's a whole lot of glass, and that's at least 2 to 3 stories. I'm just saying. And you have this second explosion, is how I'm taking it. And right here on the next page, as we open up, we're at the Historical Society. The camera's turned. Sorry about that. I'm looking at the book and not at the capture at the same time. But we see Chua making his way towards an explosion, which is obscured. Now, this is an interesting idea because as a color, as an artist who just recently has been trying to train on color in comic books, I'm paying attention to what people are doing, and it's a great way to focus the eyesight to get the Historical Society where it's still in shadow, to actually get attention drawn to it because it's being ringed by this. But it's also kind of obscuring the most interesting part, which is supposed to be this breached hole. And so we had a helicopter swooping in, and we have at least two explosions, by the way. I'm not saying that is one continuous explosion. It's hidden from us, and when we get here, Chua explores. Now, we assume that there's a firefight because now we see aftermath. This guy has been shot up. He, of course, is coming to rescue. Hold on, man. What in the world? So this guy is probably clearly dead, but I guess alive enough, or he's grimacing. His eyes now are flaming out, and as Detective Chua gets closer, this is an interesting effect where, based on the color, it's not blood. It's some. Later on, I guess we'll find out it's kind of like an inky substance. And then, whoosh, this person dematerializes into a cloud. And then we get the police show up, and Chua says, "Sorry guys, this case is going directly to Soulfinder 79 on the next page." Now, here's my complaint. Here's my real complaint about this. So, within 2 pages, we're basically getting into the call to action. The narrative hook is set within panel 2. We have an establishing shot of a kind of a sleepy little town, but apparently, like at midnight, we got cops dealing with So apparently, there's enough stuff going on here where he's dealing with an informant. Although, again, I would just say the only reason I know this guy is an informant because after the story's done, there's a discussion with the author. And I don't know that there's a better way to get basically Chua out doing police work in the middle of the night other than the obvious stakeout as a detective. I mean, how much crime is going on in this place? I don't know. It's really unimportant, but it's also the first thing that you see in this book, and we don't know who these people are. And the first thing we see is an explosion. Then we see this cool helicopter, and I wish that there was a trail of gunfire being shot down here to infer that there's an active fight happening at this moment, other than this could be a gas line explosion. I know it's not, but something is going on to the point where now we see the aftermath of a guy like obviously decked out in high, like military gear. There's been a shootout, but as Chua is running down the street, we don't have any indication that there's been a firefight. We just know that there's an explosion. I don't interpret this as being shrapnel. And why in the Historical Society do we have this guy with nods on? He's got all of his tack gear, and obviously the mystery part of it, that's all fine. But we'll come to find out that Navy SEALs are involved with this rogue group of Navy SEALs that have been possessed by a demon, and that I guess they're competing SEAL teams. When I tell you that we're going to start a story off, and there's this cop out, this detective out working, and all of a sudden, down the street a couple of blocks, there's this massive explosion, and then we go and we see military choppers coming in, and there's Navy SEALs fighting Navy SEALs, this big gunfight. Give me 2 pages. I mean, there's time enough. Give me 2 pages extra so we can have our kind of like Sleepy Town establishing shot. Then we get to see, here's Detective Chua. And we can still work the stuff about, the narrator getting us in here, that, remaining vigilant, little sleep, dedication to the job. And when most people would run, this is the kind of heroic stuff that this guy has, that he's running to danger, completely undergunned. And by that, I'm just saying, like, this would be the perfect time to show, like, just the amount of firepower. If this explosion is from missiles, show me a missile trail, like, for the second round. Or I want tracer fire, especially this late at night. I mean, there's no better G.I. Joe looking, like, laser beams of tracer fire popping off. That would be awesome. And then give me, as he's running and getting closer and closer, that we can cut to the action of our SEALs then on the ground, or like fast roping down, something like that. Like, clearly something is going on at the Historical Society where you got 2 competing groups, an open firefight. Let's see that action. And even like maybe Chua, as he's approaching, like, rounds are popping off near him, and he's ducking and like taking cover and making his way there. And then by the time he shows up, I guess the action has finished. Or maybe at this point, establishing shot, he's alerted to gunfire, and then, like, kaboom, in which case then maybe this is the team extracting, which maybe perhaps that's what's going on too, and that this was the guy left behind, one of the bad guys that like goes away. But with all that action, if the name of the game is show don't tell, and the artwork is very beautiful, it's really nicely done in a lot of ways. I feel like we're missing out on a lot of stuff that's just been promised to us. The promise was there's this super tactical, high-level guys decked out having a shootout, and we don't get to see it. We don't even get to see like the guys exfilling out, which that could be really awesome as Chua's moving up, like, hey, what's... And like, you know, a little bird comes down and like pops off with these guys, or they're on a spy rig, or they're tethered, getting pulled off the ground on like a big long rope, being pulled off, and then like, what the hell just went on? And Detective Chua is like kind of in the rubble, saying all this fantastic stuff where who would expect it from a town of 10,000 people at the Historical Society, being basically dumbfounded, but still brave going into this thing with complete... I mean, this is so completely out of the norm. In his shock, he still pushes through and is trying to, like, give aid where aid is due. And, of course, that the cops are just now showing up. I'm just saying, like, maybe all the other bad guys did dissolve already, but still, let's see the other SEALs that they were fighting against. Whoever shot this guy bounced. Let's see that. Give us 2 more pages at least. Like, that's time enough to get open one, there's a firefight, some amount of resolution. Chua's like running and getting closer and closer, and we can cut back and forth or whatever winds up being. Then we get here. And this, of course, sets us up to the right-hand page with this really awesome graphic of Father Redder, who, we come back here, we know he's number 79, so he mentions, sorry guys, this is the case going directly to Soulfinder 79. So that's a good transition, and this is really an awesome image, which I think really comes across in the black and white. Like, this is just a really fantastic image in black and white. I know it doesn't come across so much in the camera, but this book has some really good splash pages, and it's one of those things when you see it, you want to color it. And what's colored in the book is really quite good, but because it happens at night and all this sort of stuff, does come across a little dark, but it's still like really conceptually nicely done. And I will actually, let me, this is something I didn't check, but yeah, on the front, Matthew Weldon is the artist, and he's someone to look at who I think has done a fantastic job of doing underwater and a lot of water effects and drawing. Well worth as an artist, and you want to look at good examples. I think his solutions to problems are really quite good. And also when he draws and inks, I will say one of the things that shows up in his black and white artwork is he has a very sort of a glossy approach to drawing. And what I mean by that is that his characters look like they are getting illuminated and defined by interesting lighting. That a lot of the times that you're getting lighting from 2 different angles, so as someone who might want to color this, it gives you a lot of options and things. Alright, so back to storytelling. So this is really cool because now we're in this really provocative thing where we're seeing our main protagonist, Father Redder, somewhere out in the ocean, which looks like, I guess, an overturned dinghy, and he's being grappled by these tentacles. And so we see Soulfinder 79. The black tide is coming. We've set the wheels in motion. There is nothing you can do to stop it. Now, clearly, this is like a demonic font, so we can see that this is perhaps Father Redder. As we turn the page, it's getting drugged down into the inky blacks, the inky depths of the blackness of the abyss, and depths of suffering unfathomable to the human mind will flood your soul. And when we finish, you'll know that only hate is credible. Alright, so this is like really great stuff. We're making a movie. This is like a big splashy moment. It's very arresting. Clearly he's being arrested and dragged down. But then we cut to what did we just experience? Now, was this a dream? It would be nice if we got a shot of a restless Father Redder in his bed with the sheets kind of like thrown off, like a fever dream, and he's like, awoken from a banging on the door. In the first Soulfinder, when we really get introduced, again, I haven't looked at this in 2 years, but I can remember, or at least my memory was, that when we get introduced to our character, he's at a desk looking at a book about the occult, surrounded by a cross. I believe he has his rosary. These are all the sort of the armor of God, things put there to protect him, to remind him of the promise of Christ and his victory over the devil and over death itself, and his power and his station and his protection. He's the good shepherd. He protects his flock, even though Father Redder is in the position of a shepherd. Still, all of us need the protection of the authority of the true King of the universe, Jesus Christ. So, if this is him grasping with a demonic attack, not necessarily like in the terms of he's actively fighting, in the case of an exorcism, he's wrestled with the demon, and that these things can enter into his thoughts, and he has to be prepared against it, that the demons now see him as a threat to their mission, and so they might be messing with them at night. So is this a fever dream that he's having? Is this him at his desk, perhaps being seduced is probably not the right word, but he's being assaulted. I forget the term in the orders of possession. Oppression. Is he undergoing a form of oppression? I wish the setup for the cut from this, or is this where we're gonna, are we seeing something that happens later on in the story that we come back to, that this is maybe a vision of the future, which honestly that's something that the demons could maybe approach him with, is given without him going out looking for it, which is something we're not supposed to do according to the Bible. Like the same reason why you don't go looking for fortune tellers and stuff like that. You're trying to cheat the experience of life and sort of working against God's plan by trying to have pre-knowledge and then gaming the system. It gets you into trouble, I think, is the general idea. But anyway, it's not quite clear. And yes, in movie terms, it doesn't need to be clear, but the next thing that this is setting up, that we see Father Redder in this like most dire predicaments, and the next thing that we see is he's in his room. Again, like, I think this is a place where a better establishing scenario would be really good. And also, I would say that maybe this would be a place where it's cool where we start, but because this is so out of the ordinary, and as the audience, we don't know what to make of it. Like, the first thing is we could take this as literal. Like, how the last time we saw him, he had no adventures on the sea. I know Maryland is on the coast, but I'm not quite sure how close Steepleton is to the Atlantic. Or maybe he's on a river, anything like that. So this is intriguing. But I would say that this is another place where I wish we had maybe 2 more pages, because, in my opinion, as we go through the story, there's a lot of places where I think more setup would establish more things that would pay off better in the storytelling later on. And where I don't feel like the whole story is constructed around a ticking time bomb scenario, where a bad guy is trying to find something in order to do something, to enact a ritual that will bring this new demonic force that we're experiencing here, at least that's how I'm interpreting that it should happen, this new threat. Before we had Blackfire, I guess, is this main demon that we are introduced to in the first book. In the second book, one of his brethren, if you will, is the Black Tide, is this new demonic force that's out there that's trying to come to our reality, make its way into the material world to cause more trouble for humanity, but it can't really be manifested without this ritual that we'll find out later on. The terms of what creates the ritual, the timing needed for it, is one of those things that it feels to me like it's in the mind of the author and the art staff that, okay, we've talked about this in emails and we've written up pages and stuff like that, but somehow it didn't get translated to us. If you know the story ahead of time and you go back and look at this, yes, I know what's going on, but as someone who hasn't been in a discussion, or doesn't, at the end of the book where it sort of spells some of what is happening through this story out, then I can go back and look at it. But I'm just saying, like, take a few more breaths, get us back into the world, explain the stakes to us. Yes, probably most of the people are reading the second book, already read the first one, and probably already a little bit, the reason why they bought this book in the first place, or the first one, is because they already have an interest in exorcism or the occult, or were interested in they probably have some foreknowledge of catechism, the Catholic Church teachings, or perspective on there's lots of movies about the subject of exorcism and how it's dealt with through the prism of the Catholic Church. Yada, yada, yada. Anyway, I just think that there's a place where we can take a few more beats and really, if the whole thing is about the depth of the ocean, isolation, the crushing weight of the abyss, the darkness, falling away into this, you got to be able to breathe. That's not something that's quick cuts. That's something that has to really overwhelm you in the smallness, almost where this image needs to come first, and then he needs to be getting smaller and smaller to the point where you could have even a page that is like ink black, and Father Redder being this very small thing, being lost to the darkness. And more importantly, what I think that we need to come away with as the audience is that, so when we first meet him, he's just becoming a Soulfinder, and he's green, and the ability of the demons to assault him, because he has many weaknesses, as we all do. We're all sinners. We all have a past where we have regrets and things. And certainly if you go to confession, you can deal with these things where you don't have to be as burdened by your past, because you're getting a clean slate. which is a wonderful thing. If you get a chance to look into it, I highly suggest you do it. And I should take my own advice. But we all have our pasts, and these are things that demons can use against us. And I would really like to see picking up that Ritter is still, he has not mastered this fight. And granted, who can really be said to have mastered the fight against a demon? This has to be the thing that in a book, in an action book, that the main enemy is a demon. We're dealing with spiritual warfare, where yes, we want action in the material world because most of the story is happening in the material world. The action can't just be explosions and gunfight. It has to be more intrigue and more like a thriller, in which case we really need to know the struggles that Ritter is still suffering, still dealing with. And we do have some of that. He's very conflicted about his family life, the way that his mother in the previous book dies of cancer. She was struggling with faith. He was really trying to bring her back to the church, and there's conflict with the sister. Like, neither of them really were very churchy, maybe even from the beginning. But through the course of what happened, his father was a cop who died in the line of duty. You got a rich backstory within him. And yeah, you don't have to cover it every time, but remind us of these things, and definitely remind us that there are still struggles that Ritter has that are a deep vulnerability that he can then overcome as the story goes, so that we have a stake in seeing the stakes of which he has to fight against. His character arc. Every book he needs to be advancing in some way. And I just think that showing his weakness at the very beginning, the thing that he's working on, getting better at, but he's still vulnerable, set that up. This is the perfect place for it, but I don't feel like we're getting that side of the story in its presentation. We're definitely getting that this is an assault by the demon toying with them, but we need a place where when he's interrupted from this thing, it's like a whoosh, like we realize as an audience that he's got his vulnerabilities, which sets us up for the heroic actions that happen later on. And I just wish that there was more of that. It's like I say, the ingredient is there. It's, are we baking the cake correctly? And so progressing on, Detective Chua comes in. Father Ritter is woken up late at night, and I don't know how often that they're meeting at midnight or these odd hours, but it seems like a lot is happening in Steepleton, but this is just the story that we're finding out about. I don't know if this is from the last book to this one, but they've had 15 occultic things that these guys have all worked together, or two. It's not clear, but I think it's more than two by the way that they interact. And it's just kind of a fun sort of aside. But again, a kind of a show don't tell kind of thing. I will say that this is like what's interesting here as so the two meet up together. Detective Chua has brought back a scapula, which is kind of like a necklace, is a way to think about it. A sign of devotion that you wear over your heart that is supposed to remind you of the things that you're pledged to, and you always wear it with you to keep you oriented towards that goal. It's a reminder. And so apparently the demon was sort of corrupted these seals. This is what was left. Sort of like in the first one we had these obsidian matches that were kind of like the calling card of Blackfire, the demon in that case. Now we have the scapula. And it's interesting that these are a mirror, in a way, of like the church uses scapula for people who have extraordinary devotion. Will wear these underneath their clothes to remind them to be righteous in all their acts. So that we're getting an opposite of that, where these seals who have been corrupted. So there's a lot of sort of opposites at work, which, if you get into understanding things about the spiritual realm and hierarchy and all these sort of things, that the angels and the demons all are hierarchical creatures, and they are organized, in my understanding, actually very much like a sort of the military structure. That the angels who rebelled against God in full knowledge of God become demons, but they still have this kind of hierarchical construction. So it's kind of interesting that there is this sort of mirror divide, and that in the first one, anyway, that we have the scapula, which is kind of like a demonic version of what normally would be a very holy expression of devotion, having a scapula. And we're reminded of the occult book that Father Redder is going back to and studying. Again, like maybe this is a place, I don't think it's beating anyone over the head to sort of revisit the importance of these things that Redder has to like inform him as this once novice. Now he's really earning his stripes as a Soulfinder. To keep coming back to these things to inform us, get us up to speed as an audience in a managed way. You don't have to tell us everything. We're not demonologists. We're just we need to know that he's learning, and just bring us along a little bit. And again, we see elements of a firefight, but I don't know. I assume that this is a good guy seal that we're having a flashback to, or I assume that this is not happening at the time. This is him recalling about, well, they're going to find out that the reason why they were having a raid of the historical societies, they wanted to steal a book. Actually, I'll just read it. So Redder wakes up from this nightmare, or this demonic attack, and Redder, it's Chua. Open up, man. I know the commissioner finally assigned you to me, but do you always have to show up late? Right? And so clearly it's been going on for a while. I'm kidding, Greg. What's up? And the scapula in his hands. It wasn't a dream. Blackfire knew you were coming. Blackfire is back. He never left. He's immortal. Okay, but what does Blackfire have to do with this thing? It's a scapular. It's all in the Hora Noctis. The demon's most loyal followers wear a black scapular, with the promise of unique powers as a reward for the devotion, for their devotion. Where'd you get this? A dead Navy SEAL. There was an attack at the Steepleton Historical Society tonight. I stuck around for essentials. A journal from an old Spanish galleon was stolen. The Star of the Sea. It went down off the coast of Maryland in the 1700s. Alright, so that gets us up to speed. And then I will say that this is actually a little hard to see, but there are two laser red dots, both between each of their eyes. That's a nice way of showing it without showing it that they've now been raided. The scapular now. Again, this gets into a storytelling sort of thing. Now, granted, they've informed us of a lot. but this is more, again, this is a little frustrating. There's a difference between respecting the audience to be up to speed and to be able to sort of put two and two together, and then not giving them quite nearly enough information. So when we meet Blackfire, the first demon, is a snake. That's sort of like the guise that he takes, and that's how we're going to identify him symbolically. Now we have a snake-like thing, but these are clearly tentacles that are going after him. So the first thing that we get introduced to is these guys obviously have been having adventures. He asks, "What's up?" And he's got this new scapular thing. And he says, "It wasn't a dream. Blackfire knew you were coming." I don't get that from the previous pages. And if this is Blackfire talking, and again, I haven't read the other book for 2 years, I need something to sort of connect the two ideas, that either Blackfire has commissioned this new demon to come up and do it. Help me out. That's all I'm saying. Help me out. I'm down. I'm following you. But there's no mention of Blackfire until it's out of his mouth. And I feel like there's 2 pages of story that are missing right here too. Get me up to speed. Maybe there's some communication that they're having, but this to me doesn't feel like the way to set those ideas up. The ideas themselves are right. It's just how we're moving too fast. And we really need things to breathe a little more, I think. And I understand we're trying to get into the action, we're trying to get into the story. But take some beats. You're not doing 22 pages a month. This is a graphic novel, presumably, hopefully it's once every year or so. Take your time. We're spending a lot of money on this stuff to buy this book, and gladly so. I want to support this. I would say buy this book, but since I'm interested in doing my own, these are things that concern me, and I want this to be just the absolute best thing possible. And I think that we're missing out on a lot of story. We need to be reminded of the Hora Noctis and what it tells us. We need to be reminded of Blackfire. I think Jim Shooter would agree with me. Just get us up to speed. It doesn't have to be a whole lot. Get us up to speed before that, where there's another mysterious attack. Should be kind of like, if Rudder already knows, then he needs to be basically saying everything that Chua is going to inform him that we as an audience have already said. But also, there needs to be something that gets us from what Rudder is experiencing in this dream, this nightmare, that allows us to put 2 and 2 together. Or he has to basically tell us, but better to show than tell, so that when he's talking with Chua can be surprised that Rudder's back fighting demons, and they both dealt with Blackfire before, so Chua has an idea of the danger of this, but remind us as an audience that the stakes are, have them completely wigged out. Now, he's kind of wigged out here, but this needs to be so monumental and so strange and out of the ordinary that they need to be a little more breathless or under duress. Right now, it's a little too passive for my taste. And then also, maybe, well, this is just a player's choice, I guess. I mean, this is kind of a good setup that we cut from the first thing that we know. There's no sound effect that the door has been burst open. or I guess they could have just opened it, but it says the scapular now. And then the next thing that we see coming over here, this is another big complaint I have, which is the next scene is, now this is kind of a good establishing to do a big jump cut. Norfolk, Virginia Joint Expeditionary Base, Little Creek, Fort Story. So we have this nice Black Hawk drawing, and then our main mysterious figure that shows up. And this is a good line. I'll give this one to you, Doug. It's the demonic duo, Father Patrick Redder and Detective Gregory Chua. I knew it was only a matter of time before we crossed paths. So he definitely has a lot of knowledge about them. And it's a great scene to have someone in shadow, a mysterious figure, and we're holding off and seeing him, right? And then Banana Republic games don't work with me. I don't care who you are, sir. And then he says, modified Blackhawks? We're not terrorists. And he says, we'll be the judge of that. You know your Fourth Amendment. Bravo. Cool off, detective. Now, I will say, to me, I'm a little confused. Because in the Stapleton Bugle, which I guess this is military exercise reported at St. Michael's Cathedral, to me, the way that this reads is Detective Chua sees an explosion at midnight. That same night, within, let's say, a couple of hours, he goes to Father Redder's house, say, Father Redder, I saw this dead Navy SEAL, there's this huge shootout. I went to go help him. Poof! He dissolves, and what's left is this scapular. This ain't right. Obviously, there's some more occult shenanigans going on. You're the guy I gotta see. He's not waiting a day. He's not waiting 2 days. So he goes directly to Father Redder, and within the span of, let's say, like 5 minutes tops, they've already been broken into by the military and taken into custody, and which is all very fast moving and exciting, which it should be. Then we get this mysterious guy, and already he's holding up the Stapleton Bugle. So either I'm wrong that this is not all taking place within the span of midnight explosion. My guess is that we're right around like 3 hours, 4 hours at this point. That either the military now has written up what is going to be printed as the Stapleton Bugle for the next morning, which would be cool because it shows they got some reach and some power to do stuff. That they printed this up, where this is referring to what would have happened in the previous book, which, if that's the case, remind us, get us up to speed of what happened before, but the way that that book played out, it really wouldn't go along with military exercise reported at St. Michael's Cathedral. St. Michael's, I mean, maybe that was the way that they covered up the last one. I don't recall it that way. But I don't know. It needs more setup, it needs more context. And still, so okay, we got this riff there, on the tarmac. The bird pops off. They've got military escort. This is the same guy, we assume. We still don't know who he is. It would have been cool if we get a shot of maybe seeing a name tape or the printed placard or whatever you call it, where it's stamped on like I assume a plastic thing instead of a name tape on a staff uniform at the fort. But so this is a major player in our story that we do not know. We're just being introduced to him. No one says his name. No one says his rank. I don't know who we're really dealing with, other than these guys are giving him due difference, but due difference just because he's the one who comes out and greets him, and he's talking big, and apparently he can back up his big talk. But we'll come to find out. Actually, I'll read the next couple pages, and we'll get into this a little more too. And sorry for my reading. It's late in the day, and I haven't read this whole bunch. This is a matter of national security. Besides, you're the one who took evidence from an active crime scene. You're not under arrest yet. And why are we here? Your job is to tell us. Actually, probably help if I zoom in on some of these things. Your job is to tell us what you know about the Black Scapulars and the Star of the Sea shipwreck. Prove yourself worthy, Soulfinder 79. You really have been watching me. If that's the case, then, we're one step ahead of you. We won't begin our briefing until SEAL Team 5 brings in number 77. 77 is mentor. So we know this guy has access to SEAL teams. Presumably he was controlling the team that had the firefight at the very beginning. So we know that this guy's got some sway. But we're not introduced to him. We don't know who he is. Later that afternoon, up here on the next page, Soulfinder 77 and 79, you've been on JSOC's radar a lot these days. And there's, again, as an establishing shot, I wish it could have been worked out a little differently. I know you got a lot of exposition to get through, but we're covering up a lot of our guys here with this word balloon. Maybe there's a better way to do this. It doesn't bother me that much because at least it's really directed towards him. But our first introduction to our third main character, and he's teeny tiny and obscured by a word balloon, I think there's a better way to make. Now granted, it gets better here, but I'm reminded of when talking to actors about like their choice roles, and actually this was learned from one of my not favorite Star Trek movies, but the one where they introduced the Borg and they had the Queen Borg. The actress, I forget her name, but she was ecstatic about her entrance. And that really lasted with me, that when you're introducing a new character, their entrance is ultra critical. And yes, we've met, if you've read the book before, but again, Jim Shooter rules are in play in my mind, where we in this book have not met Father Crane, the mentor of Father Rudder. This is not the way to be first introduced to him, in my opinion. I think that can be stronger. If we've met him before, we can get away with this, but as an audience reading this, if I missed out on the first campaign and, okay, maybe I've had a chance to order it, but it hasn't shown up yet, and I have the standalone book, I'm just saying, this is not, get us up to speed, remind us who the old characters are, make him like really cool, maybe he's being escorted, and so we have like a view of, like, just frame him better, show him to the audience for the first time, in this book at least, define his character so that we know who he is without him having to speak in his place and all these things. Alright, so the Joint Special Operations Circus, which is a funny way of JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command, is Joint Special Operations Circus. Shootouts in Steepleton, So we know it's a shootout because he's verifying it. Show us, don't tell us that. Tell Redder the truth. Tell us what's going on now. So the way he's talking, he has foreknowledge. Okay, well that's good to remember. And so this guy, who we still don't know, but apparently knows them, is heading up, at least we assume he heads up JSOC's investigation into this stuff. Whether he's in charge of JSOC, don't know. Maybe he's just in charge of this particular strike force or whatever. Spiritual warfare isn't regulated to the civilian world. The promise of great power corrupts America's elite warriors on rare occasions. Father Crane. Be specific. Tell him about the USS Sea Viper and Captain Neville. You kept me in the dark. Tell them, Cameron. I won't let it happen to them. Very well. Alright, so he's clearly knows this guy's first name, or is it his last name? I don't know. Doug, I would just say, I like the mysterious angle of we don't know as an audience who this guy is. It's cool that we, having read the first book, we know who Father Crane is, but I still say we need to get up to speed with him. Remind us a little bit. It's been now, granted, I got this book a year ago, and I had meant to do it last St. Patrick's Day, but got a little busy with things. So I kind of saved this as my St. Patrick's Day treat to read your books. That being said, had I read it a year when it first came out, it still would have been a year after the original book. And get us back up to speed. Remind us who our characters are. It's not like we've had a 30-year experience with Spider-Man, so we don't have to remind it every time. These are new and unique characters to your own world and your own book. We're only in the second book. We need some gentle reminding, and in a way that we can, again, like, this is good information that we can see that they know each other. And he's already being accusatory that he's been kept in the dark. So they clearly have a past, and that's intriguing. But it would be good if we knew that this is, like, for lack of a better term, big dick swinging, colonel, general, admiral, who are you? Who is this guy? And then we could find out, well, Cameron is his first name. Okay, well, we've been introduced that this is General Falco later on, but he knows him as Cameron, so that informs us a lot. That's an intriguing element, but we're finding out the details in the wrong order, in my opinion, and we're being robbed of something. And this is interesting body language for what's going on. At first, they're essentially kidnapped at gunpoint, and I'll remind you, then they're brought on board. Now, granted, Father Redder was in the military, was blown up by the IED, so he's probably been around enough of this stuff where he's not super impressed, but the fact that they went through the trouble of firearms, presumably loaded and ready to go, with red dots on their foreheads, a definite kill shot. I would imagine I'd be a little hot and want to know what's going on about this. So even if he's not completely impressed just by the machinery, the situation should get him in a place where we're not as passive. Now, Crane seems to have the right sort of combativeness, like, hey, what's going on? Clearly he knows more about what's going on than the audience does. But this is kind of like way too passive, especially when your mentor is saying that this guy, don't be lying, don't be like cutting us out of information. You're trying to get something from us, work with us, right? This should be like on the edge of the chair looking forward, not like, or maybe this is supposed to be disdain, like this guy is a liar, I don't got enough time for this going on. Like, they're both trying to solve this mysterious thing, but clearly at this point, these guys know a lot more about what's going on. So I'm just saying, like, this reads kind of good. This doesn't read kind of good. And we'll find out that William Neville, he's saying, tell him about the USS Viper, tell him about Neville, Captain Neville. And we already know because the way he says it. I would just say that this feels a little clumsy in the way that the information is getting out. Again, everything in here is all the ingredients for something that's like really grabbing your attention. It's very intriguing. You've got the setup. Like, these guys just got hauled off at gunpoint. We know that something is deadly serious going on here. And we'll find out that William Neville was the captain of the Los Angeles-class submarine. That's what's happening here. The USS Sea Viper. He became obsessed with the occult, the Chora Makra, the great emptiness of the ocean deep. It poisoned his mind and made him unfit to serve. His lust for darkness brought him to Blackfire's cult, where he could plumb the depths of his soul. So we see the boat, the submarine. I'm afraid the rest is classified. Okay, well, that's fine. You whet the appetite. Given the Navy setting, wetting is a good idea. He didn't just go rogue, he corrupted SEALs. Now, okay, you don't have to, if the audience, again, probably, if they're attracted to this book, they already have maybe an understanding of military or the military. To my understanding, as a layperson who did not serve, but I worked with a lot of people in and around that have family members that have, not in the Navy though. SEALs take rides in submarines. They do operations using them, for sure. Sub-captain probably did have run-ins with SEALs. Clearly, SEALs are awesome. Every Joe Schmo knows that SEALs are badasses. Tip of the spear kind of guys. And having those two kind of connected is great. But, I mean, did he also corrupt the rest of his vessel, his crew on the submarine? I guess the next panel, I assume that this is Father Crane, early in his life. We don't really know, was this 20 years ago? Was this 3 years ago when this sub-captain lost himself to the occult? How long ago was this? I mean, is this Vietnam era? I haven't looked it up, but the Los Angeles subclass, I want to say, was, in my mind, it's like an 80s thing, but maybe it's a 70s thing. Regardless, I don't know how long ago this had happened. Now, they'll go on to say later on that they've been hunting this guy for decades. So maybe we're in the realm of the 2000s, the 90s. It all kind of works, but I suppose we don't have to dwell on the corruption of it. And it's a wise thing not to necessarily show Captain Neville, but to talk about him. And there's this gunfight, I guess, at a dock where the submarine had come up. And it even says, the Pentagon lost control of a nuclear submarine to occultists who abandoned their oath to support and defend the U.S. Constitution. Patriots and perhaps a Soulfinder secured the submarine. Neville escaped, and we've hunted him for decades. The Sea Viper was decommissioned and relegated to the Ghost Fleet of the Potomac, a ship's graveyard for maritime vessels. Now, the way I read that is that they scuttled it out in the water, but maybe, I don't know, maybe the Ghost Fleet is at a permanent dock. I wish that was made maybe a little more clear. Maybe this is a place where you just trust the audience that if they're curious, they can go look it up. But this definitely looks like a firefight. That definitely is hinting that because there was Soulfinder involved, that Crane was involved and the captain escaped. So yeah, I guess we've got a long-lasting history. This is bubbling up. I just wish that we knew who we were dealing with as the commander of the JSOC team was. We know that he has a relationship to Crane. Crane was involved, I guess, in rescuing the submarine from these occultists who mutinied, for lack of a better word, if that's the way it played out. I just wish there was maybe a little more clarity, a little more whatever. Hold my hand a little bit, Doug. Get me there. I can fill in a lot of the gaps. You don't have to go into every detail. I really do want to know at least who he is as a character. Give us his name, and then the whole thing where Crane knows him, and they know each other. They have a history, and they have this antagonistic relationship that all works. So we find out about all of this, and okay, well, we're time wasting. That's a nice trick to progress the story. Again, I'm not saying like expand everything by half in the beginning of the setup. I think you can still get a lot of this story out in a page or in 2 pages. But I think if we have a little bit more information to this point, in fact, let me finish reading the 2nd page. Time is wasting. What's in that journal that is so important? We need specifics now. You're compromised, Cameron. You withhold information. Supply us with a civilian vessel and the Star of the Sea's location. We'll secure whatever Neville's after. Don't make me play hardball. Should I tell Redder and Detective Chua what happened in Nan? I've read the files multiple times. And he's got his file at hand. I've got nothing to hide. The fiction in those records rivals that of William Faulkner, and you know it. Do we get our ship or not? Okay, so there... Doug, if you watch this, I hope you're taking this in the spirit I'm offering it. The reason why I'm spending this time is because I love and support your work. I believe in your work. This is a place where I think some outside eyes to offer some editing, or maybe it's just me. But time is wasting. What's in that journal that is so important? Well, we know that there was a raid on this historical society, and in just one blurb, the book was taken. And yes, we see it getting handed off from a dead man, shot dead. Maybe this is the same guy that we discovered because proof was handed off. But there's also kind of nice. I think this is maybe a nice symbology that Father Redder has the Hora Noctis book, which is like roughly the same shape as the journal, and that was taken. But they come looking for evidence of things taken, and they know that Chua was there and he absconded with some stuff. They're looking for the scapular now. I guess they're collecting the evidence. But in some ways, this is our MacGuffin, right? The thing taken from the old Spanish galleon. We know that the galleon is the Star of the Sea, is the name of it. They need to know why they took this book, what's in it. I would just hope that they would reinforce that there was a firefight and a smash and grab raid in the middle of the night, and they got away with it, and they've been collecting all this information, yada yada yada. Anyway, by the time we're getting this bickering and back and forth, and we've got to fill in the backstory, okay, that's all good. And yes, time is wasting. What's in that journal? We need to know what's in that journal. What makes it so important that they did these things, but the way it is coming across is that Father Crane, perhaps, or Father Rudder, perhaps, has knowledge of what's in this. Do they know the story about the Star of the Sea? Now, maybe they do and maybe they don't. But, you know, I don't feel like the characters are acting naturally within their roles in a way that we're transmitting information to the audience. And now I know that everyone's being like, especially the JSOC guy, being information is being held close to the vest because presumably there's a national security issue. Now, Chua, I don't recall if he was supposedly had prior military service, but definitely he's a detective in a police force. Our other two guys were ex-military, or I can't recall if the Soulfinders are military order priests, but I don't believe that they're chaplains or directly under they're under the authority of the church, not the authority of the U.S. military. I think that's the case. So yeah, maybe they don't have clearances high enough for this, so we can't really say everything. But at this point, they clearly have a knowledge. Crane has been involved, so he already has knowledge. So keeping things to the chest from the audience, the tensions that are shown there, delineate them a little better help us out to like problem solve this, I guess is what I'm saying. So that we also know when information is gathered, it becomes even more special to us because we know that this information is being highly guarded by JSOC guy. Father Crane really needs to fill us in if he has knowledge. He clearly has knowledge about Neville and his crew. Going back here. You're compromised, Cameron. Well, that implies some things. And so maybe that's something we can work with later on in the story. But to my knowledge, it never really kind of comes up in that way. You withhold information. Well, clearly. And that's the dynamic that maybe could just be reworked so that, again, like you may have the whole backstory as a writer in your mind, which is good. But as an audience reading this for the first time, that information, those tensions between the characters and what they know and what we know and what we are supposed to know at the time, I think can be just a little clearer, like better organized. Twice with a civilian vessel and the Star of the Sea's location will secure whatever Neville's after. So perhaps Crane has an idea of what Neville's after. And they all seem to be talking about like the Star of the Sea as kind of general knowledge, although the only interest that one would gather that they would have of this vessel that went down in the 1700s is because the journal of all things was taken in a firefight. Otherwise, the presumption is this is basically a forgotten relic. It exists out there. People may know about it, but no one cares about it. Like you go to a museum, they have this journal that had survived, and it's a story that's known to Steepleton community. One presumes it's not far from the water in this case. I don't know. It's just weird. Like all of a sudden, I don't feel like we're understanding the importance of here are the key ingredients that are going to get us on this journey. Like if people are withholding information from one another, that's fine, but the audience has to have a sense of keeping score on who knows what. In fact, it's always a little titillating if the audience knows a little bit more because we are privy to the thoughts or the story of one character, so we have knowledge of what they know, and we have knowledge of what the other one knows, so we can have a leg up kind of in this cat and mouse between two characters. I don't necessarily think that that's the way that this should go, but it's frustrating for me reading this because I kind of see where you're trying to go, and again, you got all this cool stuff that's happening. You have this antagonism between these two alphas, right? But there's either not enough of this backstory coming forward or too much. And it's obscuring, losing track of what is going to be that thing propelling us to think. So they've got to, again, like, don't make me play hardball. Should I tell Redder and Detective Chua what happened to Nam? Okay, well, that's juicy information, but there's really no payoff to it in this book. Again, this seems like it's going to be a character that's going to show up in the third book, which is great, but we need a better introduction, like having him show up at the beginning mysteriously, but somewhere between this butt shot and, okay, now we're kind of seeing his face, but it's obscured. Let's hear who he is. I'm General Falco, or someone says, something about General Falco is to be respected, whatever. Give us a natural way for the audience to know who we're dealing with, the stakes of when we're in this room, all eyes need to be on this guy because he has X authority, right? He answers directly to the president, let's say, or whatever, but we need to know how big of a deal this guy is. So even it kind of heightens the tension now that Father Crane is now like spouting off, and they got this personal thing going on all of a suddenly. That's some room for high tension as well. That, again, you're expending the time to set this up, and it's juicy. There's not necessarily a payoff in this book. There could be a payoff later, and that could be worth it, but it's to a degree distracting from... Anyway, I get it that I've got nothing to hide, the fiction and the yada yada. Do we get our ship or not? He's asking for a ship to go out there, but they don't necessarily, like, again, this is frustrating because I know, alright, so they go out to the docks, supposedly General Falco, which we still don't know his name at this point, is arranging what a man won't, unless I'm missing a page. I mean, is it possible I'm missing a page? I don't think so. I've checked it. There are no page numbers for me to check. That's not necessarily a complaint. But I'm just saying we jump directly because we're cutting through. And again, I'm not saying slow us down with every little detail, but there are some details that really should be there, and if it is at the cost of a page or two. So in the space of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, I'm guessing we're roughly around 10 pages. if it takes 12 pages instead of 10, I don't think that's a loss. If we gain clarity and we get the mood set, or even 14 pages for that matter, 4 extra pages, and everything that happens past this is set up and has payoff and has clarity, and like the stakes of the souls of these men, which is going to be the real combat that happens, not all the gunfight stuff, which there really kind of isn't that much gunfight stuff. So it's all about setting up intrigue in these characters and odd behaviors. So we, meet the ship's captain that's going to take them out to where the wreck is. He's going to be the dive master. What a man won't do for love of country. Captain Oscar Redburn. I'd rather be taken tourist deep sea fishing, but a favor is a favor. We didn't ask for a Pentagon plant. So, which isn't said before, is the stipulation, again, like you don't have to beat us over the head, but if there's this tension and the whole idea is that they just need a boat and that time is of the essence, Navy SEALs just brought this guy in, you're clearly on the water or near to it. What's the hubbub that's keeping the military from getting him? What's the demand of Father Crane and these guys? They're not working in concert, or maybe they are. But again, I get it. The whole point is the captain that we meet is the captain that got into the cult, and he's out under an assumed identity. The Kurtz's Window is the name of the boat, which is nice. The Colonel Kurtz in Heart of Darkness or Apocalypse Now is the Green Beret who went to the deep jungle, got lost into it, went mad, went local, whatever you want to say, became a god amongst these this tribe that is so insulated from the rest of the world. I haven't read the story when I watched Apocalypse Now. Anyway, it's a nice illusion. It's a cute little thing that they play off with. He's talking about taking people deep sea fishing, but this is clearly like a trawler, or is supposed to be, not the right vessel. So maybe that's a little off kind of thing, or maybe it's the detail between the artist and what Doug was asking for. It doesn't matter all that much, I guess. Or maybe he's just saying he'd much rather be doing a different joke. Is this really his boat? Was he just a captain hired to drive this boat to the location? Or maybe it's not a trawler, but like a diving thing. I don't know. The setup for how we're introduced to him, the whole beef between the two characters seems to be set up just to invent a situation why they would need this captain to be the one to take them out to the sea. I think it could be handled in a way that felt less contrived. That this oddball guy who's very peculiar, who apparently has a history with the JSOC guy, and if the JSOC guy does have a history with this guy, who turns out to be the occult admiral, is it that, or captain rather, not admiral, if this is Neville, Captain Neville, and we will find out it is Captain Neville, is this truly Captain Neville, or is this like some sort of transference, like a kind of a possession of someone like Neville is guiding him through some supernatural means, or did he just grow his hair out and has assumed this identity? It probably makes more sense that he's assuming this identity, but is this identity known to the JSOC guy, which means that wouldn't he must have known who Neville was before, definitely had his records since he's hunting him, wouldn't he be able to figure out that this is the guy they've been searching for 2 decades? Or, by happenstance, he knows of this guy by reputation. Maybe Neville murdered this guy that he knows because the demons know the plot of JSOC, which would not be an unusual thing because demons have the ability to observe us without us knowing. They're spirits. And if they want to get at us, that's one of their means of doing it, is spiritual oppression. One of the reasons why angels are depicted with wings is they have the ability to be everywhere. It's an iconography, symbolic thing of their ability to be in multiple locations without having to travel as man does, but in a supernatural way, a conveyance. That's what the wings are there for. That's why Mercury has wings on his heels. I'm just saying, I wish that there was a little more setup, and if it was that JSOC, Falco, or whatever, I have to believe that he does not know that this is the guy that they're trying to find without them just arresting and taking him into custody. The story would be over. So we can assume that he does not know that Neville has taken his place. But if that's the case, then I wish that we got a little bit of this intrigue that this guy, maybe they have an idea of who he is because he says he owes a favor. So they clearly know each other. And but he's assumed this identity, and that he can start acting in oddball ways that don't jive with maybe what Crane and Redder would have been informed about him from Colonel Falco. Because this guy is already being very off-putting, he's being hostile to these guys. So if they were friends, it would make kind of sense, since General Falco, which we see down here, I guess. See, this is the thing that's kind of weird, because on one hand, it feels like we're getting this play acting between Crane and Falco. They go way back. Maybe they do genuinely have like a little bit of a heated relationship where they're not being square with each other, and they really should, considering what they've gone through together. On one hand, and so this is really frustrating, Doug. And if Crane and him have a good enough relationship that Neville work again, my friend. Any Night Stalkers to spare? Need someone I can trust. Watching our back. Heading out. Read by General Falco. This is clearly Crane's hand. Or at least I assume it is. Since Crane is the focus of interaction here, I mean, I don't see a phone in the hand of Father Redder here, or in Shua. But I take it back. Maybe it's one of those, but they've just met General Falco, and that they would have his number. This to me said, the way I read this is, Neville work again, my friend. General Falco, the only one we know who has an established relationship, would be Crane. We have no this hand is holding a phone. This is our captain. So it's not the captain's hand. That would be a weird thing if they were in cahoots. I have to believe that this is Crane's hand. We can see that General Falco has read this text. They're clearly friends. Maybe they do have a little bit of whatever. Maybe this is making it up to each other. But if the antagonism was for the sake of others in the room, why are they play acting? What does it get us? Unless it's just a device of intrigue for the audience. where the next morning that there was so much of a beef between them that now Father Crane doesn't trust the military to ferry him out there with, well, all right. So you don't go in with an entourage looking for this as a race against time, because Neville's group got away with, they know enough that Neville's been at it, or at least they think that Neville's group is the one who stole it. They had to know that because of the scapular, and they were engaged in a firefight with him. So let's assume that our good guys, General Falco, and the good guys, whether they're Navy SEALs or not, that were in a firefight, and that the book, the journal, was absconded with, that maybe there's some prior knowledge of what is in this book that's not established at any point. Oh, goodness. Maybe they talked to some of the staff at the thing, and they got a little bit of knowledge of what's in it. They know the sea, the star. Anyway, the audience is what we're concerned about. What do I, as the audience, know? We know that this is taken from a boat. The boat is somewhere out in the Atlantic, and that presumably we know that these are occultist kind of guys. We know that they've already dissolved into inky smoke screens when they die. So we can assume that they're going to be, they stole the book and they're going to be going out to the boat. That's, I guess, understandable enough. But why they have to hire onto this boat and use this oddball guy, there's clearly a need for a cat and mouse element to this story. And this is confusing me because I need more. I need this cleared up. Because I know you want to get to the point where you have this kooky captain and he's being a jerk to everybody. And we're going to find out eventually that, you know, the captain is already possessed. But the possession is not overt in this case. He's play acting. Which would also go along if he was play acting and perhaps he murdered the real captain and took over his place unbeknownst to General Falco and everything. And the demon is informing him of how to act and to do this sort of like awful pantomime of like, it would be great if we saw the real captain of this ship. Like, either he's been thrown overboard or he's stuffed in a locker or something, so that, you know, help us out. Make this guy more of a danger. Make the demonic force that's already in here, and it's kind of implied, and implying things is sophisticated. I mean, that's where you're trusting the audience to make inferences, and you're treating us like smart people, but at the same time, give us just a little bit more. Like, it's cool in the art that he's got this weird kind of like jaunty face and attitude, and he seems to enjoy tormenting people. And later on in the book, when there's some notes from the author, Doug, there's talk about how claustrophobic this boat is. I think that there are some things in the art that could be shown to like really push the people together. Like, show us a narrow hallway, for lack of a better term, going through the bulkheads where people are scrunching their shoulders going through. If it's claustrophobia, there's room enough for these chairs to come across versus them sitting here. I mean, just really compact the space, I guess, and build that claustrophobia. I know it's difficult in art because you still have to show things, and presumably we're in a camera that's like up in the, like a security camera that is fixed in a corner of the opposite wall, but we're looking over something, so it gives this idea that this galley is a bigger space. But thematically, if this guy is being increasingly antagonistic, that there's this compression that's happening, this claustrophobia, but it's also intensifying these raw emotions, that would be perhaps like the demonic presence, like getting that, sort of like in the presence of the One Ring in Lord of the Rings, where at the council meeting of Elrond, where all of a sudden the power is like very subtly, without them necessarily knowing, that they're all starting to get in an argument. Like these guys gather around in the presence of this demonic force are getting levels of agitation or heightened emotion, and his face, is like he's being very provocative with it. And so they want to know about, well, let's get into here. The pirate in me is really envious of you right now. And we get a shot of, his peg leg. It's a funny little thing. He says, IED blast Iraq. What's your story? And he says that he was EOD Mobile Unit 6. That's why you'll be diving with me. So EOD is basically bomb disposal for people who deal with bombs. And that's why you'll be diving with me. All right, I could look it up. I presume that is like basically a underwater frogman demolition group. He's a Navy diver, or used to be once upon a time. It might be a nice detail to just give us a little more, but it doesn't need to. After I know what we're supposed to find down there, why should we trust you? So he's kind of like probing, trying to figure out what they know. So is he in cahoots with Falco? Is what they might be thinking if they're in antagonism with Falco, except that we know that at least one of them, presumably Crane, really isn't. Crane knows these guys well enough that he should be able to trust them implicitly at this point. So where's the cat and mouse with this? Does Crane already know that he is not who he says he is? And if so, why don't they just grab him? Unless maybe they're supposed to like figure out what he knows about the book or what the book is leading to. Maybe that's what the implication is. After I know what we're doing, so he's probing, but he stole the book, and so he knows what he wants. Why is he playing along? Is he trying to figure out what they know? I don't know. I feel like the setup can be a little bit better. Now I will say again, like there are several in this book great splash page illustrations. Although I will say the scale of this boat seems a little, I don't know, it's a nitpick. I really shouldn't. I mean, it has great impact on the page. When you open this up, it's really well rendered. Although this is like code for Windows as far as the way it's described. No, I don't know. I guess that could be double stacked. They're not stories, so that's not that big, but maybe that isn't a person on the window. Anyway, a big boat, nicely drawn, nicely painted as well. And we come to learn that this boat was sailing over from Spain to Maryland is where it's going. And on it, a whole bunch of people died, like a whole bunch of the crew died. But there was a miracle that happened. They died of, I guess, the food spoiled, and they got sick, and like 90% of them perished. And the only ones left who were Catholics, there was a priest on board, and they survived this long journey on the Eucharist alone, considering the numbers that it fed. Presumably this is also kind of like the 5 loaves, and that it was continuously giving and sustained them for a long sea journey, that enough of them made it. And one of them at least had kept a journal, one person who did make it ashore finally, because we'll learn that they were sustained all this while, but eventually the boat capsized in a storm not that far offshore. And that was a great tragedy, but at least a few people survived, or at least one survived, and the journal of the thing is the thing that they stole. And this is kind of a neat little thing too, again, like, the book does take advantage of what it gives you, in that here's like some sort of chicken bone that he was eating for his meal, this antagonistic captain. Now, recalling all this, actually, let me see here. Well, I guess Father Redder is the one who knows about this, so let's go back. After I know what we're supposed to find down there, why should we trust you? I'm taking 2 priests and a cop into the open ocean because the Navy moaned about national security, and I'm doing it despite no prior warning in an upcoming storm that has the Coast Guard wetting its pants. Fair enough, I'll tell you the story. Whether you believe it or not is another matter. So Father Redder is the one getting him up to speed. So presumably he has foreknowledge of the sea, whatever. It'd be nice if we had an indication prior to all this. Just like I get to know the rank of General Falco, this guy's name, only like 5 pages after he's first introduced. I mean, maybe this guy isn't General Falco. Maybe this is Cameron something or whatever. But it's never said, and how am I to know? I want to be able to keep my character straight, especially when I'm trying to piece together all these different things. And you're giving good clues in good ways, but help a brother out. That's all I'm saying. So Father Redder, it would be nice that he had some foreknowledge, and we knew that he had some foreknowledge, and then he naturally would be the one to fill us in on at least this part of the thing, since we don't have any indication that he and Father Crane at any point off camera, so to speak, had discussed this. Then they're really kind of informing each other at the same time as the audience is learning. So anyway, yeah, we find out about this miracle, and that miracle alone makes him a candidate for... Oh, here's another thing I've got to get some clarity on, Doug. Alright, so I'll read the whole thing. An ill-fated cargo ship called the Star of the Sea made its way across the Atlantic from Spain to Maryland in 1780. Spoiled food and sickness killed 90% of the passengers and crew before the ship was even close to sighting land. Nearly everyone else on board perished in a squall that hit just a few miles from what would become Ocean City Beach. One of the few survivors, Jonathan Savoy, kept a journal which detailed something truly miraculous. The Catholics on board were solely sustained by the Holy Eucharist, the body and blood of Christ provided to them by a priest, Cardinal Pacifico Cassia. Alright. Well, 2 little things. They're coming from Spain in the 1700s. I think it's fair enough to say that everyone on board is probably already Catholic. Better to mention the 2 or 3 people who wouldn't be, but okay. I get you. You're holding the hand of the audience that might be reading this that aren't Catholic or putting that together. But, all right, this gets me a little bit. Provided to them by a priest, Cardinal Pacifico Casilla. Is his first name Cardinal, or is he a cardinal? And if he's a cardinal, which is like a higher in the priesthood, Pope, Cardinal, Archbishop, Bishop, priest, and then that would be your priestly caste. There are other people involved as far as like deacons and stuff like that, and our beloved nuns. But as far as the priesthood goes, that's sort of the order. So generally speaking, if you're a cardinal, you wouldn't say this priest is cardinal whatever, unless maybe you're appealing to them to remember when they were newly ordained, they would automatically start off as a priest, generally speaking. That you would just either choose provided to them by a cardinal who was on board, Pacifico Casilla being the name of the cardinal. That's just weird to me, unless that's his first name. And if it's his first name, wouldn't it be Cardinaldo or something like that? I mean, something more Latin influenced. I don't know. That feels like it's not right. Maybe it is. I'd love some clarification on that. Because this happens again later. I don't know if this is an editing error or not. But I would love some clarity on that one. Anyway, so there's this miracle that happens. Captain here has a bone to pick with everybody, and he says, and now we're going to dig up his waterlogged bones. And Chua, it's late. Show some respect. I'm getting sick of your attitude. Now, that's a good thing to go, but I would like to see like this antagonism more on, like here he's kind of like bippity bop, whatever, and we don't really see his face other than, I guess he's looking a little perturbed right here in this opening scene. But I would love to see like this antagonism as he's mostly seemingly going after, well, I'm sure he's offending everyone as best as he can, but show us the whole group of the Soulfinders team, including Chua, reacting and kind of like giving each other looks about this guy is off, we don't like him, like the claustrophobia, everything is intensifying to then get to this point where we're getting this big emotional swing, because before then Chua doesn't seem to be, at least in my memory, this like prone to emotional outburst. And of course we get this, he's loving causing all this, but you know, a demon would love loss of control and all this sort of stuff. And anyway, so they kind of separate out, and Chua goes off to his quarters, and he's busying himself, like getting his pistol ready, and the captain comes in, and he reveals at one point that, so Chua is Filipino, and the captain is speaking to him in Tagalog, which, okay, captain, you know, he's probably sailed many seas and knows a number of languages, and he's just demonstrating his basic knowledge and being a jerk in all different languages. And later on, so this is the way that we kind of get the first indication that something truly isn't right. So again, Doug, I get that you're trying to set this thing up when you have a kind of mystery and this mysterious character, and we're supposed to have bad vibes about him. And then, since Chua knows that he speaks the language, Mahalaga ba ito kung hindi Bomalak Bukas, I almost tag along. So I probably just murdered it. And certainly the delivery was terrible. But the captain says, I don't speak gibberish, which clearly he has knowledge and he's just being insufferable again. And so he says, excuse me, you called me Glapsduder, Captain. Anyway, he's speaking German and tells him, just remember he's in charge of the ship, and yada yada yada. And so we have this growing mistrust, and Chua is playing this kind of role of being this sort of the outside of the Soulfinders. Chua is the sort of the Watson to Sherlock for us as an audience. He's our sort of normie's view into this strange and unsettling world, the spiritual realm, and he sort of straddles a little bit compared to the Soulfinders, and he's kind of, or like the Doctor Who's companion. That's his role for us. And so it's good to see that he's kind of like wise to this guy, and he's going to keep a lookout to the point where he's got his gun ready. He made sure it was ready to go. And there's all this beef, and so we get more and more creepy vibes off the captain. And then the next thing that we know, the captain is going seemingly from cabin to cabin. And he sees Crane in here, and he assaults him. And then we basically come to know at this point that Crane does not know that this is Neville, because I guess he would have identified himself, but clearly we know that he is possessed because he spits some black ink into his eyes. This is a good drawing of like their effect, and it knocks him unconscious, and then we clearly know that this guy is bad. And alright, here's another thing I gotta say. In the storytelling, this is probably somewhere between art. I mean, the drawing of all this is very cool. This is a great kind of big splashy page. But, as good as this is, maybe there's a different way that we can tell this should take another page. Because from this, we get to this panel where he's looking out the window, the cabin window. He goes, Night Stalkers. Falco again. Good call, priest. But only one of us has a guaranteed ride home. So, after reading this again, Night Stalkers, those are the 160th SOAR Special Operations Air Regiment. They are, if you watch Black Hawk Down, they're the guys, the top pilots, they're helicopter pilots, or drivers, whatever you want to call them, that basically are hot shit and drive the tip of the spear operators, your Deltas, your Navy SEALs, your Green Berets, you name it. The best that Special Forces or Spec Ops in the American arsenal are, these are the guys who transport them through the air, through helicopters. So that's what the Night Stalkers are. And he looks outside and he notices them. But the first thing that we get to see after that is this is the underbelly of the ship that they're all on. And there's a little diver. And there's a little glowy thing. So we can assume that something is being done to the bottom of the ship. Then we see the interior of the helicopter cabin, and we can see the outline of the ship in the water at night. And then we see the helo presumably fly away. Here's my problem. What are we to make of these abstract things? So maybe at some point while this is going on, and this dude's being creepy, and he's essentially, seemingly, going to be getting rid of people in his way. We can see his glowing eyes. He's clearly possessed at this point and has unusual strength. And even though Father Crane fights back, he's overmatched by these powers. We don't hear any whoop, 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 whoop. Now, presumably the Night Stalkers, they do have modified helicopters that theoretically can lessen sound effects. But this guy's got demonic powers, so he can be aware, he can go out and look at it. But the first thing that, looking up into the sky, talking about Night Stalkers, we see something happening underneath the boat. Now the implication later on, we can reverse engineer this, that this is a good guy Navy SEAL planting a charge on the boat. Theoretically, this helo is going to pick up our divers, or divers, somewhere away from the boat and get them out of the action. Or maybe it's a tracker, whatever it winds up being. I wish this was more clear, that there was a better establishing shot that leads us. It's a judgment call, but I'm just saying, like, here's the other thing I don't understand. So if something is planted on the boat, then later the next morning, Father Redder is supposed to go on this dive to the wreckage of the boat that sank, and they're going to investigate to find out why the book was stolen, so that they could find the yada yada yada. And Chua shows up. He's been up all hours. I guess Father Redder was always only going to be the one who goes down. I guess it's just convenient that Crane's out of the way, or I don't know. I guess he was along for the ride, moral support, whatever. And I guess the excuse is they are getting into the ocean. There's a big storm coming anyway, so maybe they're having act sooner than they anticipated, and Crane wasn't ready. Whatever. Anyway, they got to get in the water. Now, when it goes to the water, this is some really beautiful stuff. And as much as I'm being critical about the storytelling, I do want to say that the next few pages are some of the best that this book has to offer, as far as, like, as we flip down here, I think this is a magnificent page of our guys going down on a dive. You can see here the page before, we have the wreckage of the sea, Star of the Sea, and our guys are going down in tandem from this boat. Now this looks a lot deeper than 50 feet, which is what they mentioned. It seems like 100 yards, not 50 feet, but whatever. They go down in their gear. They're communicating. They're going to go into the wreckage. You can see there's a hole in the side of the boat. They swim in, and then we get this great splash page with a couple inset panels. And we see presumably some lovers that died in each other's embrace, or Yeah, anyway. And then they travel a little further in, and then they get to the cabin where the priest slash cardinal is presumably there's a cross with a little cha-ching, little light beam effect. And then they go in, and I will also say that this was this is a great 2-page splash where they go in and they find the priest. Now, when I first opened this up, the way that the face is drawn and the power stance almost was like, well, maybe this is kind of like a bad guy that had taken over. But in fact, that's not the case. We come to find out that this man was so holy in the Catholic Church. There are many saints that one of the most beautiful thing about the saints, the recognized, canonized saints, are those who were completely in love with Jesus and God, served him well, even though they may have had a terrible past. Like many of the most famous and well-known and beloved saints had terrible beginnings, weren't the best of people, but they had like St. Paul, dramatic change in their lives, and that they so full-heartedly, not full-heartedly, but with a fullness in their hearts of love, had a massive transformation, had obtained such a degree of holiness that their bodies, once dead, when the spirit had left their bodies, the bodies were preserved in the most close to perfect holy state. The idea when original sin came into being, that death entered the world, and the world was corruptible and given to death. But some of these people had so much holiness left on them that had been a part of their life and their bodies were preserved. Like the decay that sin brought about was so removed from them that they did not decay, and still don't. There's 100 or so of them, certainly a number of them, that are on display that you can go visit in certain cathedrals throughout the world, where these people are perfectly preserved, and a real testament to just how holy these people were. It's not like, was it the continuously embalmed Vladimir Lenin, or like pharaohs. There was nothing done to them. Their spirit left their bodies, and their bodies were preserved, which is a testament and a great grace given to us to see these things that are hard to fathom, but that's what's there. So this is their encounter. And it is like a startling thing, because this is something we don't normally talk about, although it's out there for people to know. And it's a real shame that 50, 60, 70 years ago, this was something that was highly celebrated. And not that anyone doesn't celebrate it anymore, but it's just not talked about. It's forgotten to our culture, which is a real shame. Modern life is not nearly as rich because we left these things. Okay, so anyway, this is like a big pivotal moment. And all I will say, I'm going to look through the next few pages, and again, I'm going to make comment about this in the storytelling, where the shame is the artwork that we're getting is really good. The story idea is very clever and interesting. We're talking about super seductive stuff. We're talking about an incorruptible, which no one talks about. We're talking about Navy SEALs and submarines. This is like Hunt for Red October meets The Exorcist meets The Abyss meets all these sort of things. You've got so many deep ingredients, and it's an interesting formation of the story. but it's one of those things. I have to believe that this is so well worked out in the mind of the author and staff that they don't question their presentation because they know the story so well that they're not thinking about people who have never heard it. And so I'm arguing for hold our hand a little bit more. Thank you for treating us like intelligent people of being able to put one thing together with the next. But I'm also saying that just give us a few more setups that the gravity of these things like have deep impact. I'm actually kind of glad that we weren't told about this phenomenon, because this is shocking to turn the page and to see this. And my first reaction to it was not to think of this as being a holy man, but maybe someone that is possessed because of the pose, and this being so strange. And yeah, because this is definitely like a superhero. In superhero language, this is a power pose. Although it also can be a gentle, like just floating, obviously, is a strange buoyancy is involved here, which is also interesting. But one presumes that there is a certain degree of rigor that's in the incorruptibles, but I don't know that their muscles. I mean, this is not something one thinks about quite a lot. I have no idea. I suppose there's a measure of disrespect to ask, is the flesh of the incorruptible still pliable, as though they had just expired, which is the state by which, I mean, they're so close to life, even though they're dead. I suppose that they would not be in a state of rigor. It is just kind of strange and shocking to see that this is the pose in death that our priest is in, clutching items. But anyway, if he's going to clutch an item, these are good, because in his right hand is the living body of Christ. We assume that because it is protected, that it is pre-blessed Eucharist. And he also has the rosary, which is a spiritual weapon that anyone and everyone should come to know. It's a series of prayers and a remembrance of the gospel when used correctly. Very useful for everyday life in all situations. You should learn more about that, for the one or two of you who actually read this and have gotten this far. So anyway, this turns out to be the crux. And as we go through, again, storytelling, so we have this wondrous moment, and here's Father Redder and his reaction after being, stunned by this sight. Panis angelicus fit panis hominum. The bread of heaven is made the bread of man. Now, his eyes are looking at Cardinal. I'm going to call him Cardinal, but maybe he is just a priest. Now, the object of him saying this is in his right hand. His eyes theoretically should be going down this way to his hands, if this is his shoulders, because that's where the living body of Christ is kept, in his hands. And but he's kind of looking at him, but just maybe this is just a outpouring of just wonderment and seeing these things, because also the miracles related to the Holy Eucharist, sustaining these men, and perhaps has so sustained our priest that he is now incorruptible. The next panel, this is what gets me a little bit. So this Neville, our bad guy, is possessed, and all of a sudden he produces something in his hand. Is it a turnbuckle? Is it, I don't think it's a two-ended scalpel. Is it a syringe? I don't know. But there's some device in his hands. I don't know what it is. And here, the next panel over, although this is something, alright, this is the Cardinal's hand. This is the Holy Eucharist that is in his hand. This is presumably Father Retter. I don't like that his hand, if this is Father Retter's hand reaching out for the Holy Eucharist, I don't like that it's colored in this illuminated way, even though I know in this next panel his right hand has a light flashing on to where his hand has picked it up. I just wish that it had more black. Fine if you're washing out the part that's spot lit. Give me some black so it ties it in and gives depth, because the way that the drawing is right here is that the fingers, this is a tangent that's kind of bad. I wish it overlapped, like as he's grabbing for it, that the fingers then cross over the Eucharist, so that the next thing is it being pulled out of is now in Retter's hands. But it hasn't crossed that yet, and it hasn't even crossed the fingers of our Cardinal here, and that the treatment on that is blending in with the washout. So this is not middle ground. This is now almost reading as behind this hand. And I just wish that weren't quite like that. That's a nitpick on me, but you know, that's me. So here we see Father Retter. He's got the Eucharist in his hands. And the demon now, we see his red glowing eyes. I wish maybe they were a little more prominent. But we see him looming behind Retter. And then this same hand object is got motion lines, and he's plunging something. It's not clear in this drawing. It becomes more clear in this one. Whatever this device is stabs into Father Retter's shoulder. This is the oxygen tank. Now again, it's not important what is used to stab Father Retter's shoulder, which makes him release the Holy Eucharist and the vessel in which it's contained. I forget the name of it. But now the body of Christ is exposed to the elements, and this is the real prize in the whole story, for multiple reasons. But there's an attack. Alright. Now it doesn't matter, because all we really need to get to for the story to function is that Father Retter has now gotten the thing that everyone is trying to get a hold of. It's the Holy Eucharist. The demon is going to take this. This is what you will surmise. Or this is what I surmise anyway. That this is the bad guy's plot. They're trying to materialize. Geez, I realize now I've been going for over 2 hours. I'm going to wrap this up. This is how I do with these stories. Here in the nutshell is what I believe is the bad guy's plot. They are trying to bring into the material realm, or at least from whatever has entrapped Blackwater, this new demonic danger, into the world where its influence can be thrust upon humanity. in a new and dangerous way. Captain Neville and his occult goon squad of corrupted Navy SEALs, which is like super dangerous, to have like an occult group with that amount of skill, training, firepower, willpower, but being evil, that's really scary, right? That's a fantastic set of ingredients. In order for these people to profit and to be made stronger by getting their patron, if you will, this demon into the material world, that they can now have this lie of power within them, they have to create a ritual in order to have this happen. And we will learn that they are going to perform a black mass. In order to do a black mass, the utmost scandal is to take the consecrated living body of Christ. Now, you have to understand, Catholics believe that in the communion wafer, when it is brought to the altar and blessed by the priest, his priestly duty transforms, this is called a transfiguration, transform what is seen by all senses to most common human beings from a wafer of bread into the living body of Christ. That this now becomes the true paschal sacrifice. This is an astounding miracle performed in the church every day, right there, probably in your own neighborhood, and most people have no conception of this happening. Now, many people don't believe it. I know a lot of our Protestant brothers, perhaps anyone watching this, don't like to think in those terms, to which I would say that you're missing out on the true beauty and truth of what was offered, and the remembrance of the Last Supper. What is being enacted is, and by the way, this art book at the very end has some beautiful religious drawings. Some of them are exorcisms by Christ, and even here's the woman with the, I believe, the hemorrhages, who reaches out and just touches the hem of his cloak, and her faith is so great that she's cured without Jesus actively, so we're led to believe, without active knowledge, but the omnipresence of God and her faith. It's a beautiful thing to be discussed in great detail by someone more knowledgeable than me, but it's beautiful. I believe this is the madman amongst the tombs, who was the man possessed by Legion, freed of that. I believe that's what this is a drawing of. Could be wrong. Off the top of my head, I'd have to go back and look exactly what this is. But, obviously we have a curing going on, and the reaching. I mean, these are just beautiful drawings. Great stories being told. But here we have the Last Supper. And why the Holy Eucharist and its transfiguration is so important is you really have to go back to the Old Testament and understand, at least this is the way I understand it, is the institution of the priesthood and when the tent of meeting, which is the precursor to the first temple and the second temple. When the priesthood is brought about, that there are sacrifices made. Now, compared to Jesus, and Jesus as the perfect sacrifice, who takes on all sin and conquers it on the cross, which is why all sins can be forgiven, because they've been paid for by the death of the one true perfect man, who is Jesus Christ. He is the Holy Lamb. The Holy Lamb, before Christ, the way that people would have known it, was lambs were sacrificed on the altar, and you had what was known as the priestly portion, which was the fatty part, and I think one leg, which was the priesthood. Well, this is going to get way into it, and it's been a long time since I've read the Bible. So again, I'm no theologian. I'm just a guy trying to learn and understand as best as I can. But one of the things that I often think about when during the Mass and Eucharist is being lifted up and transfigured is back to the Old Testament as a parallel with the New Testament and what's happening in the Last Supper, which is that the priests, well, the lamb is an offering, it can be a sin offering, but I think about at the Last Supper when Jesus is breaking the bread, and basically he's commissioning them, in my understanding, into the new priesthood, because you are to think of him in these terms. If he is the Lamb of God, the true sacrifice that takes away all the sins, then in this bread, so is he. And by giving an extension of giving the Eucharist, what this is, this first time that it's being done, is absolutely what's being done with the priesthood at the time and before. At the temple, which is they would have been given a portion of the lamb for their own, which is only given to the priesthood, so that he is essentially commissioning them into the priesthood by giving them this and saying, remember me with this, as also he is also the sacrifice, he is also the priest, he's prophet, he's king, and now he's elevating them now to this new kind of priesthood without being a Levite or brought into it. I'm not 100% sure if it was just the Levites at that point, because after they go off into banishment in Babylon, I'd have to go back and study it. But when he's doing that at the Last Supper, I often think of what the face is like. If I were making the painting of this, how would I depict it? Not as Leonardo da Vinci does it, which is wonderful, but he's done that. There's other ways to think about the event. And I like to think about a sense of bewilderment, honestly, on the faces of the apostles when this is happening, when he's presenting this. The same thing with the cup of wine that is blessed, that becomes his blood. In the priesthood in the temple, the blood is spattered from the slaughtered animals, the slaughtered lamb, as a means of purifying. So when they install the altar at the temple, it's purified by the blood of the lamb. In my mind, the lamb, I'm getting way far afield, but heck, I'm talking about it. So lambs are probably the most valuable animal in the ancient world, because every part of them is a kind of a wealth. So you can milk them, I guess. You can do this with goats too, but the wool creates clothing as a benefit beyond just their meat. or processing their horns, and horn is like the ancient world's plastic, and in a world that is presumably at the time very arid and not a lot of wood and timber, horn is like an extraordinarily valuable material. And of course, leather and their bones can be used and all these things. But the fact that they can produce and produce and produce and produce wool makes them incredibly valuable. And the fact that you would be sacrificing this most valuable possession, and granted, not everyone had gold and stuff like that, but if you did have wealth, the wealth was in things like your livestock, because they really were the things that clothed you, gave you food, sustained you. You needed these things. And that so much of this most valuable animal, and remember that you're supposed to give the first and the best of this most valuable thing over to the temple for sacrifice. That this is what's owed to God. God only asks a little bit, but he wants the best. And so that's a model of our souls and stuff like that. So, Jesus is this most valuable, spotless, perfect example of this lamb being given over as a sacrifice for expiation of all sin, and that the Holy Eucharist is the transformation of this simple thing in its greatest humility. Christ in his greatest humility appears in what we see and experience in the form of bread, which is actually we believe as Catholics, his living flesh, his living presence. So Christ has not left us. He's actually with us right now, in some places on display for the faithful in the Catholic Church, or Orthodox churches, I believe, also do this. But it's a thing of great and important beauty. And the apostles, I believe, at this moment that Jesus is doing this, because this is the Passover, they have to be aware of the symbolic and the true nature of what's being presented to them. That's why I tend to think of them as being, if I were to do a painting of what they look like, they would be bewildered, I think would be the word I would use. Shocked, stunned, that they are now in this position. Because just a few years earlier, they're fishermen, they're tradesmen. And now they have superseded, and the world that they live in, the priesthood, the scribes, the Pharisees, these are all people who are dedicated to the work of God, and somehow they have now jumped over their position in society in this one world-changing, history-changing moment. I think that that's an incredibly important thing. This is a beautiful rendering of it. I'm completely off track here, but it does matter, because now that you have a sense for why the Eucharist then is this ultimate perfect thing, going back to the story of the evil guy's plot, this is why I say this is one of the most scandalous aspects of what they would call this Black Mass, where it is a corruption. They are hijacking and trying to put to evil use the true manifestation of Christ on earth at this moment in the Holy Eucharist. This, of course, they can't do, but they can't win over Jesus Christ. They can lower themselves. But still, it is a wound felt by all of humanity that this scandalous behavior would be done with our Lord and Savior. It's not an idea of him. It is him. And so the plot is that these bad guys are going to try and corrupt and in a terrible way of thinking, the devil knows that he's lost. And this is one of the most puzzling things, something to be pondered a full lifetime, maybe never to be satisfactorily answered. The devil, if we understand that he was perhaps a cherubim, one of the highest order of angels who actually served at the altar of God in heaven, was so bereft and jealous that his position, which was very high, was lost at the introduction of God loved and is loved, has this desire now to create a new class and creature of spiritual being, which is this strange hybrid that he invents the universe. The material universe is formed to express into it the human being. And at knowledge of this, and in full knowledge of God, that could not stomach this. This is the great tragedy of all tragedies, that in the living presence of God and perfect understanding of who God is, an angel is still a creature with its own free will. It is spiritual, it's not material. Although they can enter into the material world. This is my understanding of the angelic. That couldn't stomach losing an idea of position. And this is the great pride that begets the fall, that by his own inability to love more creatures created in love, that the devil knows that he can't conquer God, knows that he cannot conquer Jesus, the Holy Spirit. But perhaps the only thing that it can do is because fallen angels know that God loves all that he has created, that perhaps can't defeat God, but can, in a way, wound him by harming those that he loves. It's a terrorist act. Honestly, it's probably the first true terrorist act, which is going through and injecting original sin, corrupting this new creation, simplifying a lot of things, and definitely maybe getting into dangerous territory. But I just think that that's the real great tragedy is why, if this creature knows it can't win, why does it continuously go about trying to cause harm and hurt? And that's a mysterious question that, ask me one day and ask me another, I may have a slightly different idea, but certainly greater theologians and geniuses and thinkers, I'm not putting myself in that category, have pondered. And so anyway, the idea is, with this black mass that the bad guys are going to create in order to bring about this manifestation, this demon into the material world, has to go through this mockery of the true mass, which is the true celebration or remembrance of the perfect sacrifice that paid for all sin, past, present, future. As long as there is mankind with the soul, and the soul is wounded by sin, the Mass is there as a means to the Church is a hospital for the soul, and the Holy Eucharist is the true medicine, along with all the sacraments. Not to get too far afield on it, but anyway, the Black Mass is a mirror to the Holy Mass, in this perversion, this corruption, is the ticking time bomb. So when I was going on so much earlier, and we're going to probably wind up being about 3 hours on this, and I can't imagine that anyone besides myself will even care to look at this. The problem I have with the storytelling is you have all these interesting details, and essentially, once the bad guy gets a hold of the Eucharist, the thing that unlocks the ceremony, it is then should be considered a race against time, because now they have the thing to produce the ritual. The ritual is going to unlock the manifestation. This is the way that my mind reads that the story wants to be told. That we really have to get the action going, because now the bad guy has the element, and like I said, the as far as the Soulfinder's going, yes, they want to rescue this guy from possession, but at the same time, they also have to want to rescue the Holy Eucharist to save it from perverse use. And so this is the thing that really has to propel us. But I don't feel like we have a sense of the time crunch. And every second that's lost, just to sort of catch us up at this point, the bad guy has now stabbed, and I presume he has injected Father Redder with some sort of, maybe it's that black inky material, but his eyes go dark, and he's now starting to drown in a spiritual sense, as well as a physical one. And now we're going back to where this demonic presence is already starting to enter into our realm and is already starting to attack Redder, because the first thing that we see when we see Father Redder is he's out in the ocean being attacked by the tentacles of this new, as the symbology of this new demonic threat. And we can see it going after him, and it's trying to tell him that no matter what he does, he cannot stop him. Which is, should be weighing on his soul. That's why I'm saying, give us 2 more pages of this and really outline his vulnerabilities early on. So now when you get to this point where the battle in physical form, not just spiritual, but in physical form, he now is fighting under the elements. He's maybe it would have been better if, when they get to this point, that so presumably at this point they have enough oxygen where they can do their task, go around the boat, then make their way up in slow descent, because they're far enough down where you'd have to worry about going up too fast and getting the bends. Instead of stabbing him with something or injecting him with something, which I presume is happening here, he cut his airline. And now, after he's stabbed, and before, I guess his eyes black out right here. He's stabbed, he drops the Eucharist. The bad guy grabs the Eucharist. He also pulls away his air breather. And at that point, then as Redder is freaking out, just being stabbed, and his oxygen is gone, and he's blindsided by this guy. And then the bad guy gets the Eucharist and hauls out of the scene. Redder has enough within him to stay calm, and he reaches out for the rosary. Now this is poignantly constructed, and he grabs the Holy Rosary, which, coming from a holy man that is so holy that he is an incorruptible and perfectly preserved, that this, puts this in the category of a saintly relic, even though this person isn't recognized as a saint. I mean, come on, the evidence of him being preserved like this, even though no one knew what became of him, that not that there is holy power in an object, but it's kind of like it's the fact that it is surrounded by a remembrance and the presence of holiness is so there that its ability to influence the person observing it is kind of like a photograph. If you look at a photograph of someone that you love that died 5 years ago, that photograph is not them, but it can fill you in with a great deal of emotion because it focuses your mind to think about that person in a way that just plain thought might not, because it's this almost tangible snapshot, like your memory. I am reminded, more than just the sense of my memory, but the sense of my eyes, for instance. And so being able to hold a holy relic, we'll call this a holy relic because it's associated with this, we will say obviously saintly man, or the indication is there is that it impacts the viewer, Father Ritter, so much that it helps him focus into the more important things like Jesus Christ and Savior, that as he's being like pulled under the influence of whatever was injected to him, that he has this kind of extra armor and weapon of God to help him fight off demonic attack. And this is, again, like, we go from that. We have a brief scene with Chua rescuing the still knocked out Father Crane, as the boat, again, like with the storytelling, the thing that was planted on the boat detonates. So did the good guys SEAL plant a bomb on this boat? And I guess if they didn't hear back, if Falco didn't hear back from the Soulfinder team, that they would just scuttle the boat to ensure that no one got whatever. And that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Perhaps because the captain who was possessed was an EOD guy, recognized that something was there, or perhaps just planted it himself. This is where I believe the captain scuttles his own boat because he wants to kill off these troublesome soul finders and Chua and anyone else, because the nature of evil is to do evil. But if that is the case, don't confuse me with where was it? Don't confuse me with this sequence, unless you explain that the bad guy captain took a good guy's insurance policy or whatever and used it to his own. Because otherwise, now I don't know who's who's doing what for what purpose. And I'd like to think that as the audience, I should be able to kind of keep score, or at least say that there's a double cross and a triple cross, or the only reliable people I know are the Soulfinder and Chua. I'll just, for the sake of saying this, is Chua is part of the Soulfinders, even though he's not a member. He's their pal. He's part of the team. So I'm just saying that for me, in the storytelling, is a point that could get cleared up. And I don't think it would take a lot to do it. Maybe it's just a line of dialogue, or put in a particular panel, or just give us enough. And The cut here, I think, could be better. Again, like I would cut to remind us because it's not immediate. We do have this. I would come back to Rudder actually maybe even falling deeper as a dramatic device into the abyss, and because he's now sort of in the realm of, because he's been injected with the squiddy ink, that he's now potentially in the thrall of this force. So give us a little bit of time, and then, because he says the abyss, my head, chest, being crushed, can't think straight. Where am I? Mom? Give us a couple of beats. Let us really, because we just went from this action scene where Chu is doing a rescue to, I just want this constructed slightly differently, because what we're going to find is that this is a manifestation, and he's saying, no, I know that this can't be real, and we're getting that wound. Again, you don't have to beat us over the head. Jim Shooter rules. Remind us a little bit at the beginning what his weaknesses are, what he's still working on, so that we have now a sense of the scale of danger that he's in, so we also know what he has to overcome to defeat this demonic attack. And so what's kind of cool is this manifestation is actually kind of like the angler bit on an anglerfish, deep in the inky depths of the ocean. I wish he's surrounded by, I know it's here, and this is kind of him seeing like this spot of light coming closer and closer. I just give us a beat or two more, whether that's 2 extra pages or 1 extra page. There's a way to do it. So the surprise, I think, is spoiled here. Rudder is falling into darkness. He's reaching out, groping at anything. He's trying to understand because now he's got the ink in him. He's trying to make sense of this reality that he's first coming into and not quite sure what is what, except that he feels like he's being crushed. So theoretically, he's falling deeper into the sea, and he's trying to figure out what's going on. I think he needs to struggle in that, starting to get his bearings, sees the light. As the light is drawing closer, then I much rather see her like this, coming closer, coming closer. I don't want the first thing to be the back of her shoulder. I want to see her coming towards me. That's just me. It's, at first it's like a beautiful, almost like a mermaid, if you will. A beautiful light. It's getting closer. Is he dead? Is this an angel? There's different riffs that he could sort of, his mind trying to make sense of things. He's in this stupor, mentally, reality-wise. And as it gets closer and closer, then it is his mom, and he can reflect what should be set up way back here. Reflect. In fact, it would also be kind of nice if, well, we'll get to it in a second. But that's when we get about his weaknesses, his vulnerability, the angle, the bait being used to seduce him into despair is like this woman who could then, like, we're seeing her as a younger version of herself. Maybe even like coddling like mother and child. Him as a young boy, and him sort of like trying to make sense. Is this memory? Is this real? That sort of thing. And then we can get to him like dealing with this surreality and his confrontation with this manifestation that's messing with him, and then he can realize it, then it would be crazy cool if it's like here. I much rather, if this is the angler part, the lighting thing, I want to see a giant gaping mouth of this manifestation as this angler, instead of this smaller, more personal, even though this might be, I forget how big an anglerfish actually is. I'm saying make it monstrously big, because it's not really an anglerfish, it's a manifestation, just as the blackfire is this unrealistically gigantic snake that's big enough to swallow a man whole. The anglerfish should be just like that to him and create the greatest amount of spirit. And it would make an awesome. We've already seen that the artist Matt Weldon is really capable of drawing some great pictures, and in particular great splashes. That would have been a fantastic splash. Take it from here and then zoom out, and then you just see almost like the Jaws poster, except not like the woman swimming up at the horizon with the shark coming up, but kind of coming at you and getting that depth and that scale as a representation of the abyss trying to swallow him through and capture him through seduction. And of course he gets physically bit. They don't really go into it. Is this a spiritual wound? Is it also partly physical? They don't really talk about it for sure, except there's a throwaway line later on where someone asks him if he's okay. And I just think of it as, whereas this is fine, I can read it and I get the story, but I kind of feel like it is a missed opportunity. That's what I'm saying. I think that there's so much to be, what's the phrase, pay to be made or whatever. There's so much that can be squeezed out of this, that my frustration for you, Doug, and art team, is that you didn't, even though I can follow along and I can piece it together, I think there were missed opportunities. That's the best way I can say it. I wish that there was more of the sequence and that it took full advantage of all the ingredients that are there. This would be the perfect baked cake with frosting and like good frosting, like the cream cheese frosting and all this sort of stuff. Beautifully adorned, and I kind of feel like some of the ingredients weren't measured correctly. And yes, it is a cake, and I can eat it, but it's not nearly as enjoyable and perfectly balanced as it could have been. And I know I've been going on forever. It's definitely over 3 hours now. It'll probably never. Look at this 2-page spread. Obviously, you're going to think about Jonah and the whale, and also at the same time, you're going to think about Captain Ahab and Moby Dick, which I've never read, but I know all about the sinking of the Essex, because when I was younger than now, I was in Nantucket and got to go to the Whalers Museum, which was a wonderful and impactful thing I got to do. And it's really cool that this is a kind of a rescue. And it visually is exciting, and it's all there. It's all the ingredients are there, just a little bit of reworking, and I think it could be so much more stronger. And yes, we do get the thing where he sort of breaks out of the stupor of his mind being in this sort of spiritual, non-material realm, let's call it, from the attack. The attack is broken by, I'm going to say that this is an agent of God, much like the whale was used to transfer Jonah onto his purpose that God set out for him. that this will was sent to the rescue as a spiritual device to get him to wake up, which he does, and then his oxygen is out, and then so we have no idea how long he's been out. We know he's got an hour worth of air when he goes down. If the guy doesn't inject him, I mean, maybe he cuts his hose, and so the panic that sets in is very real, and his ability to conquer that fear in the moment that he has. I mean, maybe he can get enough air, or there would be enough air left that he could get up. Getting him injected. I just wish that if he's going to get injected with some squid ink, whatever, demonic squid ink, that it's not like the panel before, out of nowhere, this thing is presented. I want it to be more deliberate. Let us in on the story ahead of time, the plot of the bad guy. Or give us something that's a more immediate, understandable thread. I mean, that's just a me thing. All this works. I just think maybe it could be better. And the same thing is, Doug goes on to explain how he wanted this to be a real example of teamwork, and each person bringing things. In the book before, Father Redder was having trouble with Blackfire, like being much stronger than his abilities, and Father Crane stepping in and helping him to pull him out of the enthrallment of the demon. And here, the roles are reversed, which I think is a really kind of wonderful thing. And Father Crane, we know, has dealt with this before, and so to see him now in this peril of being like really assaulted, maybe from as we're seeing it, like out of his depths, pun intended, having Father Redder there to pray over him, give him strength, that he manifests a harpoon as a spiritual weapon, which is established in the first book that they kind of do, which is great because it gives us a way to have an action moment in an action comic in the spiritual realm where we're not necessarily dealing with material things, that as a manifestation of I don't want to use the word willpower because now we're getting into theologically messy things, but as a holding on to, let's say, the armor and weapons of God, to give oneself over, that is a visual signifier, a symbolic tool to escape the grasp of the demon, right? And so now he's like doubly armed. He's fighting back the enthrallment, and then spears him, and then he comes out of this enthrallment. All along, I will say, I wish that, like Jaws, that, in Jaws the movie, we only see the shark a few times, and that its lurking presence is the greater threat that we experience in its mysteriousness. And we get a few scenes where we're getting like sort of the danger level from the narration of this demon saying what it's going to come and do, and it's really kind of playing tricks with you, giving itself more power than maybe it does, because in a way we are kind of entertaining it to threaten us. Not to say it isn't a threat. Clearly it's a very dangerous threat. But I wish that its presence, again, like with this ticking time bomb kind of idea, is that in a movie, when you have a ticking time bomb, you keep going back to the countdown, which gives you an idea of, we're getting perilously close. March Madness is going on right now. The most exciting time in a game is maybe the last 5 minutes, because you're aware that time is going down. And if your team that you want to win is down 10 points, you know their ability to crawl out of that hole is getting harder and harder as the time goes away. So having this idea of the presence becoming much more manifested in the material world, or its ability to get into the minds of these people in the material world, the spiritual battle, that it's able to get its tentacles on you and make its presence felt more and more, whether it's through these agents, the evil captain, the evil seals, or by its direct assault into the spiritual, the soul plane of, not that movie, but the spiritual plane that this soul warfare is happening. It's getting harder and harder. The intensity is increasing. We're coming up to the point of greatest decision. And eventually, of course, this is some really nice drawing, nice little sequence here that works in black and white and stuff like that. But all of a sudden, change your mission plans. I'm just saying that we need some clarification, like it's logical at this point, that they've been at sea for a whole day, and this sequence, I don't want to go over it too much. They wake up 6:45 a.m. at noon. This kind of is along the lines, which I thought one of the more successful pages in the first book was Father Rudder rotting in jail, and his attitude as people come to visit him or don't. Likewise, this is them in the abyss, if you will, hoping for rescue, but they only have themselves. And by 5 p.m., they're holding on to the wreckage of this ship, just trying to live. I imagine it's cold. They're depleting their bodies. So this is like an echo for the miraculous thing that happened in with the cardinal or whatever, that we, is just underneath them. That this is kind of like a parallel, that they're surviving similar squall, and through their faith is kind of holding them up, and that they'd be helping each other as they're starting to maybe fatigue, and that they, honestly, this would be one of those things that this is a tricky call. I could almost want to see another page of this where they are as a group. Like, talk about wanting to really show them working as a team. Here they are. The bad guy has gotten away. Ticking time clock. Their only hope for rescue is if the guy that they had an antagonistic relationship with the chopper comes looking for him in the middle of a bad storm that we already heard that the Coast Guard was afraid of. They really have nothing, and they're out in the middle of nowhere in a race against time, helpless. I almost wish that this then led to spiritual warfare, where they really are like, they've been treading water. Yes, they have their vests on. Some of them do. And they're kind of holding on to some wreckage. But this is the moment when they really do have to rely on each other to keep their spirits and the physical strength from just giving up and falling into the depths. And this would be a perfect time for more spiritual attack. And also their friends. I mean, it's the way it's told makes sense, but again, I say, here's a thing where you could really lean into it. And maybe if we were making a movie and not a comic book, that's the way you do it. You switch it up a little bit. But this would be after a day of this, and they're exhausted, giving up hope, maybe, or not allowing themselves to give up hope, which would be even better. If they were separated, yes, they'd lose spirit. But because they're together, it's the thing that they hold on to and saves them until they do hear a helicopter that comes and rescues them. And then this is what I was saying about they check on Father Redder to figure out if he's healthy, and he basically says that he's pretty much good to go. So I guess it's more like a spiritual attack, but I don't know. I wish it was a little more clear in the rules of what the power was, and maybe this is, well, if the ritual was done, he'd have more power, and then being caught in the anglerfish's bite, the demon's bite, would have manifested more physically. Maybe it's something that which doesn't need to be dwelled on, but anyway, so again, ticking time bomb, they're like, well, where did he go? Where are they now? And he figures out, well, probably they're going to go get the old submarine back, and that's like the set piece for the final thing. So they got to go to the graveyard where it was, and when we see it, it's out at sea. So maybe it was in a kind of a, not a dry dock, but like a marina or something like that, a sub pen where they're just decommissioned. And that's where they have them, and they escape with it. But the good guy Navy SEALs now, so Falco clearly is involved with them. But they go onto this thing, and there's a couple other things that are kind of curious. So again, we're making an action book, but the main bad guys is spiritual warfare. So you got to get, the thriller element of it has to get, is what the action is immediacy of purpose and that sort of stuff. So they got a team of SEALs that are already there, and they come on station, and then they're breaking into the sub. They cut their way in. Again, supposedly there's a crew of evil SEALs in a submarine. Okay, ding, submarine, cool. Evil SEALs, cool, that are possessed. Alright, you got my attention. You got good guy SEALs making a breach. They're about to get into a firefight. There are no sound effects, but we do hear Chua saying, after these guys go in, this is ridiculous. Why are we waiting here listening to a firefight? Where's our weapons? Our time will come, and if Neville is still here, then no amount of firepower will do much good. Alright, true. The difference between material fight and spiritual fight, that's good to outline. However, show don't tell says, you're telling me one of the most fantastic stories that I didn't get at the very beginning between good guy SEALs, bad guy SEALs, inside of a submarine, and I'm not saying it. I am very disappointed that I'm not saying this. And Chua says, yeah, well, this cop could use a little firepower right about now. That could be one of our guys, assuming that we're hearing screams and gunshots, and he's going in, which is a noble thing. We're establishing his character's man of action, wants to get in there and do what he can. Especially if you consider, like, to a degree, there's a sense of helplessness because the Soulfinders, the whole reason they're there is this spiritual warfare, occultic practice. He's in way over his head. He has no, well, outside of, I'm sure he's a good Catholic boy, but his expression of things is material, and explicitly material, and he wants to do things, he wants to act. which is noble in his character. But Soulfinders are better equipped because of their training as priests and their understanding of the spiritual world to deal with the spiritual matters. So Father Redder goes in, and then, alright, this is what I don't get. Admiral Styx. So, either, and I think he's mentioned once earlier in the book, but let's just take it from here. He's recognized by Father Redder as they enter in. Was Admiral Styx a good guy or a bad guy? Presumably, he's a bad guy. Because they go in and he says, Abyss is coming, you're too late. And then, poof, he disappears and he's left with Scapula. So, Admiral Styx feels like he has a part to play in the story that's bigger than the one mention, which I'm pretty sure happened earlier. But the fact that I'm even questioning his role in all this stuff, is he here at JSOC? I don't recall. I think his name is dropped at one place, but this is my problem. You've got an economy of characters in the storytelling. I know who our Soulfinder group is. It took me some degree of figuring out as to who General Falco is. Admiral Styx has been called out by name. He has had a role. Help me. We're only really dealing with, you got Captain Neville, the Soulfinders, Falco, Admiral Styx as a named guy, and then one other guy at the very end. Please help me as an audience, especially since we're not doing the comic thing that says, the little box above them, this is who they are. Like, this is Captain America. This is, in case you were reading this for the first time. Help me as the audience to be introduced to these people. So when I do see them, that I get a sense of shock when he goes, Admiral Styx, what are you doing on the sub? Well, turns out he's a bad guy. But even then, like, if he's a bad guy, getting ready to do nefarious things in a firefight, well, maybe they weren't anticipating getting caught. And that's why he's not in combat gear. But he clearly has his weapon on, and he was fighting SEALs just moments ago and got blasted. So I'm just saying, like, there seems to be some missed opportunities that would make greater impacts to learn whether this character is a good guy or a bad guy, can be trusted, can't be trusted. Was this an unreliable friend that was always a friend? We're playing lots of games, and I want a little bit of clarity. I don't mind in a spy thriller if we're not quite sure until the very end what side somebody was on. And maybe they were never on anyone's particular, or like Han Solo. He's a rascal, but he's the thief with the heart of gold at the end. I get that. Sometimes the thief is just the thief, and I need to know that too. But I just don't know this guy, and I want him to have more impact to me as a reader, and I didn't get that. And then this guy, Neville, who's taken over and is now transformed, and this, by the way, is beautiful. It almost reminds me a little bit, and it's been a long time since I looked at the Frankenstein stuff by Bernie Wrights, but that always struck me as like beautiful pen and ink, and looks great. And it looks good colored, but going back to the line work. By the way, this is a great drawing. It's coming up on the next. Yeah, looking at this. Well, this camera sucks. I probably should be doing this with an iPhone or whatever. But that's way too much of a hassle, and I talk too long. That was beautifully rendered. Cool design, good caricature in the face, coming around, and then, I mean, this looks like it had to be photo referenced. It's too good. But this is really nicely done, and unfortunately, come around to the page. Now look, it's a good coloring job, and it's a good coloring job because it focuses the attention where the attention needs to be. But at the same time, I wish there could be a little more separation of the elements because we're losing so much of this good drawing. It just becomes so dark that I wish it weren't so. And maybe it's when it went to press and it printed a little dark, I don't know. But this is a cool sequence, and we see that, of course, in the world of the spiritual realm where this guy is so taken over by this demonic manifestation, and did the ritual take place? Was it successful? That's not clear to me. It's not clear in the story. But maybe because this guy is transforming, or is this like in the minds and not in reality? By the way it's being drawn, it looks cool. That's the main thing. It looks cool. And we know he shot up, and that material solutions to a spiritual problem are not going to work. And so the only real solution to this is to exercise this demonic force that is transforming him, whether in reality or in perception. But the perception is a manifest of the bleakness of his heart. And he's demonstrating his power, and he's flooding the thing. And so now our new ticking time bomb. So presumably they didn't quite. Well, I don't know. It's not clear if the ritual was successful, or they interrupted it, or it was halfway through. That would have been something that would have been really useful as a reader. And we do get to see a couple of seals like blasting him, but we know it has no effect. And they're, despite all their training and expertise, are outmatched in this case, which is, a cool factor. Because when you mention a Navy SEAL, it already is evocative of a degree of, like, these are human superheroes. What happens here, he's laughing hysterically and then goes underwater. But the real weapon to use against him, again, maybe this is something that needs a little bit more space to transition from where you have, now granted, I understand this is a cool drawing, and this is action, and we want to make an action book cool drawing. But in storytelling, we need to understand that the material solution to a spiritual problem is not going to work. So we need a couple of beats. And it's kind of here, but between this, maybe he laughs it off, and then he's going to demonstrate that he's going to do something even more wicked and powerful, to which he starts to do something. If we're making a video game, he's powering up, right? His levels are increasing. And if you don't do something absolutely now, he's going to explode into some superpower combo that really is going to be beyond their abilities. So it's like now or never. And this is when the spiritual portion of it has to come out. And it needs to feel like, okay, the Soulfinders, we are not playing the demon's game anymore. And we are now at the point, the only thing that we can do, because maybe the ritual didn't finish, and this is incomplete, and we're not going to allow it to complete. And the way to break it is to do an exorcism. And this, I guess, is a form of that. Well, it definitely is, because Father Crane, I break every occult tie of black magic between you, foul spirit abyss, and William Neville. I bind every power of this spirit, and I command him to leave William and go to the foot of the cross. This is like powerful stuff. Exi de humming, come out of him. Now, we're going from 0 to 60 immediately, and to the point where, it's never going to be that easy, because the demons, especially power form, are going to put up a fight. And this thing that it's going to do, assaulting, so this is the demon's last chance. This is, quote unquote, to the death. Takes Father Crane, his most dangerous foe at the moment, and he's gone beyond the view of Father Redder, Chua, who are both present there, and taken somewhere where we don't know. And Father Redder is now growing more desperate. Again, first book, he's a complete novice. He's learning the way. In between the first book and the second book, he's grown in ability, and he's demonstrated already that he has a means of fighting back against the lure, literal lure, to follow into despair, which is a great sin, and one that we are all prone to as human beings. But he prays, and the prayer is, "Behold, the handmaid of the Lord, be it done unto me according to thy word." That is Mary's response to the invitation of the Holy Spirit to make manifest into the world, into the material world, the Son in the Holy Trinity. God offers himself to become manifest as a man in the material world, to be experienced in a way never before and truly contemplated or imagined. There was, from the beginning, the promise of a Savior, but in a way that I don't think anyone could have really imagined, which is why Jesus was such a controversial figure of his time, and even today, because it is hard to grasp in even people who believe when you really ponder it. Such an overwhelming subject. It creates pause, but he is basically saying in a devotion way, he's calling on the intercession, I believe, in prayer with the Holy Spirit and Mary to also pray along with him for deliverance, and to which a rescue is completed. An imperfect rescue, we'll find out. But the man that was seduced into the occult by this demon, the demon has been broken from him. But we don't see some of the battle. And I'm not saying that we have to. And again, this is, if it's set up from the beginning, and we know the vulnerabilities of Father Redder, because at this point, it's not so much about Father Crane. Father Crane has experience with Neville, and I wish that there was a little bit more that we start off, and it feels like their history of them dealing with each other culminates to this moment where Crane can try and effect a rescue by breaking the demon's grasp on this man that is corrupt. So maybe we can still save the corrupted man and pull him away. And Rudder doesn't have the experience with Neville, but he loves his mentor, his friend, and he also loves this man, and he doesn't know that is their chief enemy. And this really is the culmination of he needs to fight through his fears. I mean, as an audience, fighting through fears, whatever. It's a spiritual battle, so something is truly being asked. And whereas Crane is forceful, it can't be seen as it is a manifestation of his willpower to make the demon go away, which could be also an interesting thing to explore with Father Crane. He is very experienced, but we're all human, and there might be a temptation as an exorcist to think it's about you and not about actually the power of Christ, which compels the demons, because his is the absolute power that they must obey, even though they play games against it. They know who he is, and they must succumb to his power. So potentially the reason why they are allowed to do these games, like in the book of Job, to tempt us, to beleaguer us, is in a way to spiritually toughen us up and to humble us so that we may have a better understanding of Christ's love for us and his command over things, if we but truly give ourselves to him and ask him for his power, because he loves us. And it's an interesting relationship, but it's not about us. It's about him and our relationship to him being in right order. And if we're talking about a spiritual battle, it seems to me that that would be kind of like the stakes, where even though, and this is just me kind of like trying ideas, if you're ever going to watch this far, Father Crane has to have an arc as well. So we know he's got this something going on with this Falco character, and he's got a history with this Neville, that maybe that history helps, maybe as Father Crane lose himself, let's say, a little bit, where he does verge on becoming a bit willful, in that the sort of naivete, to a degree, of Father Redder then coming in and pleading and knowing it's not about so much his will and his spiritual power, for lack of a better term, but his earnestness in asking not just for his friend Father Crane, but also for the chance at salvation, let's say, for this poor man who has been riddled with demons, that his request is granted. And through the intercession of the saints and the Holy Spirit hearing and being a part of this prayerful request, which is the point of exorcism, is not so much the ability of the priest, but the asking in all sincere belief for Christ to liberate these people from the destructive hands of demons. And so, mission accomplished. And I'm just saying, like, maybe there's a page or two more, that this is really, this at this point, to me, is the book. It comes down to this moment. We're building up to this moment. And I can infer a lot of things because I am a Catholic. If I were not a Catholic reading this book, I was interested in the adventure. Yeah, I like scary movies. I watched some Exorcist stuff, and I like military stuff. And this seems like it's a cool, fun read. The art's cool, stuff like this, and I've heard recommendations about it. I'm just saying, hold someone's hand, teach them the values of what is risk, teach them the setup, so the payoff then is elevated because of the obstacle overcome. And this is a difficult one because the obstacle is not the easy thing. The easy thing is a physical fight because we all understand that. But you really do have to set up the stakes of one, one's potential spiritual demise, losing someone's soul. Those kinds of sacrifices are not, I think, personally, I believe, because everyone has a soul, they have an understanding of the spiritual world to a degree, whether they believe it in and of themselves or not. I think that there's some internal understanding, at least, of the concept. And I'm just saying, like, as far as like our stakes getting to this point, exorcism is all about rescue. It's not about punishment. It's not about, at least my understanding, and perhaps I'm getting far over here too, but and even looking at this next page, when they're, the demon is expelled from him, he's left in this stupor of a state, and they further have to rescue him. Now, I will say that there is a kind of symbolism that can be taken from this. This is very much, and I think this was probably intentional, like Lazarus being pulled out of the grave, although Lazarus walked out. But this is a kind of a rebirth potential, symbolically speaking. It's also coming from the waters. The water is always symbolic of, remember, one's baptism. We're never told if he was baptized, and certainly we are in the epilogue told that his fascination with the occult is so strong that as long as he allows the door into his own soul to be left open to the demons to come in, they will, and they'll get worse and worse. So maybe they have plans for him later on in other stories, which would be interesting because it really does make him that much more of a tragic figure if maybe we learn more about him. To a degree, it's not necessarily needed, at least for this book, but for the sake of the Soulfinders, since the theme of this book seems to be more about wanting to really think of them as not, here's the rookie on the team learning the ropes, but this go around, it's more like they're really starting to work as a team, and there's it's still a bumpy road, but them working together, culminates in this event. And so it doesn't need to, ultimately it's always about a rescue mission, an exorcism. But it doesn't necessarily have to focus in on the backstory of Neville at this point. But because of that, it really does need to factor in on this. We can help each other work through our problems to finish the mission. The mission is the rescue. And so they do rescue him, but I just wish that that moment of transcendence, which in the spiritual warfare, the moment of transcendence, that thing, giving up the self for the sake of another, is the thing that, I don't want to say unlocks, but it has to be, that is the thing to be conquered, for this to be the heroic victory for our group. Granted, it is not their victory, but their part in the victory. They are the imperfect instruments of beloved Christ. And that's all I'm getting to with this. There's some, the epilogue, and I guess that. It's really good drawings, that sort of stuff. But I've been going on for almost 4 hours now. This will probably never upload to YouTube. Certainly, if you do watch this, I hope by now you've learned that you can go at least 2 times speed. The end result, buy this book. The ideas are good. The art is good. Clearly, I've talked to Doug on live streams. They're working on third story. They have, from what I understand, that he's cagey about it, but they've got good ideas. This is a worthy story and series. And Doug is a good writer. He has very good ideas. I want the very best for this book, for this IP, if you will, for this continuous story. I think it's a story worth being talked about. Certainly, there aren't a lot of other people talking about it. And in these days, having, even if it's, a story, I think it's worthy to be in the imagination of the public, for those who believe and those who don't necessarily follow the Catholic faith, but maybe this is a way for them to at least grow an appreciation for our beliefs. So all I'm saying is I want this to be the absolute most successful thing it can be, and I've spent a lot of time, what's going to sound like bashing, but it really isn't. This is the truest form of critique. As I understand it, when I was in art school and we would critique paintings, my goal in critiquing a painting is to always ask the person who did it, what were they trying to accomplish? And I've talked with Doug on live streams, I've said before, and I have a good sense of what I believe he was trying to accomplish. And when I see what is obviously a very good book, worth buying for the price, worth having, and definitely worth having when you consider what might come next, and I do believe it's only going to get stronger. But I hope before the next one goes out that hopefully you would be able to get comments like these where I truly believe that there is a better book in this, and lessons can be learned from this. And because all I know is if I were somehow an editor or on the team or just someone kicking back ideas, I would say all these things, and then hopefully, because I like what's here, I just want it to be so much more, because I see the value in it, in the importance of the subject matter, and I also am very much a lover of the format and medium of storytelling. And I just wish all the best. By the way, this really is a handsome presentation. It came in this box, which is super cool. The packing on it is fantastic. I would just say, if you get a chance, I'm sure I probably will only be the only person, if this ever does upload, to look at it. But please buy this book and reach out to Doug and let him give him some attaboys, and if you're like me, you see this as an imperfect but very good presentation. I just want it to be the best it can be, and the next product to be even better. I had a lot of the same comments in this first book, although I think that the storytelling, and maybe it's because it was the quote-unquote origin story, it was easier to avoid some of these kind of pitfalls because there's a means of introducing things. We're sort of being introduced in the middle of a story and then sort of trying to get through to the cool stuff, I think a little too fast. Just, again, given the subject, take a few deep breaths. I think the pacing was too fast in some places, and that a better story, which is in here, suffered where it didn't need to. I'm not saying every one of my suggestions was the perfect one. And I certainly hope that he has gotten a lot of good feedback, and he deserves it, because this is wonderfully crafted. I just would love to see this art team and storytelling team with the next one get those things necessarily a little better. And my hope is, if anyone does watch this, that it affects that end. It is, like I say, a true critique in that I do this because I wish for the success of the art team and the book, and that everything that is made in art is a stepping stone to the next thing that is made. If we are not growing, we are dying. To take from a city planner's mantra, but it's very true of the arts. If you're not growing, you're dying. So this is growth, but I hope that from this, a next greater leap in quality can be achieved. And I just want to give my best wishes and sincere thanks that they even made this book. I know it's not easy to do these things. It's very demanding, especially when you have another job, and to get the quality, the presentation, the print quality, the build quality of this stuff. It has a bookmark. It's fantastic. I love these guys. I can't wait to buy the next one. When I love a football team like the Panthers, I want them to win the Super Bowl every year. And if they fall a little short, then of course I'm going to be saying, well, they needed someone else on the offensive line, or if only we could have stayed healthy, or whatever it is. This is me being a fan. This is me caring and loving about what's being done. And I wish you all the best. I'm going to end now, and good luck. Maybe we'll see this uploaded in a month. Bye, everyone.